Preface. I need to tell you 3 things before we start, and I'm going to tell them to you the way I'd tell you in the back of an ambulance, because that's where I learned to talk to people on the worst night of their lives, and if you picked up a book with this title, there's a decent chance tonight is one of yours. The first thing is that I know what time it is where you are. I don't mean the clock. I mean that if you're listening to a 4-hour audiobook about getting over a woman, you are probably not doing it in the sunshine with your life humming along. You're doing it at 1 in the morning, lying on one side of a bed that used to have 2 people in it, or driving nowhere with the radio off, or standing in a kitchen that still has her handwriting on things. I know, because 8 years ago, that was me, with this exact kind of book in my ears, checking my phone every 4 minutes to see if a woman who had already left me had somehow changed her mind since the last time I checked. She hadn't. She wasn't going to. And nobody in my life would say that sentence to my face, which is the reason this book exists. The men around you are going to lie to you for the next year, gently, kindly, out of love. Plenty will say she'll realize what she lost. This book will not say that one time, because you're not a child, you're a man having the worst season of his life, and men in the back of my ambulance always ask me the same question, is it bad? And I have never once helped anybody by lying about the answer. The second thing is who I am and who I'm not. I'm not a therapist, I'm not a coach with a course to sell you, and God knows I'm not a guru, I'm a paramedic. 24 years now. I've restarted hearts on kitchen floors, delivered 2 babies on highway shoulders, and held the hands of more dying strangers than I can count, and none of it, not one night of it, prepared me for a Tuesday in January when my wife of 12 years set down her fork and told me she loved me but wasn't in love with me anymore. I was 38 years old, we had a daughter asleep down the hall, and over the following year I did almost everything wrong that a man can do. The begging, the letter, I'll tell you about the letter, the whiskey, the 3 A.M. internet, the shameful drive-bys, the rebound, all of it, and I kept a stupidly good record of the whole collapse, because writing things down is how I've always kept my hands from shaking. This book is that record, cleaned up just enough to say out loud, plus everything I had to learn to climb back out. It is one man's case file. Where what happened to me matches the research, I'll say so. Where it's just my scar, I'll say that too. Real names are changed, and some details are shuffled to protect people who didn't ask to be in a book. But nothing here is invented for effect. It doesn't need to be. The truth about this particular kind of pain is dramatic enough. The third thing is a warning, and it's the reason I almost didn't record this. Parts of this book are going to offend somebody. Maybe you. There are chapters ahead about why she seemed fine while you can't eat, about what the internet's angriest men get right about women and where they'll poison you, about what your marriage actually looked like from her side of the bed, about money and courts and what happens to fathers, and about the text message that is coming for you in about 8 months, and I have written all of it as honestly as I know how, which means some of it sounds harsh in a world that mostly hands heartbroken men a greeting card and a beer. I made a decision when I sat down to write, and I'll make it a promise to you now. I will not flatter you, I will not flatter her, and I will not flatter myself. There's a version of this book that's angrier, and it would feel better for about a week. There's a version that's softer, and your mother would prefer it. Neither of those versions gets you out. Honest gets you out, and you will get out. That's the last thing, the only piece of comfort I'll allow myself before we start, and I'm allowed it because I earned it in the worst currency there is. The pain you are in right now has a shape, and a timeline, and an exit, and I have walked every foot of it in the dark so that I could stand here at the far end with a light. I'm 46 now. I have a life I would not trade to undo what happened to me, and a daughter who watched her father come back from the dead, and, this is the part you will not believe, and that's fine, there is a woman from that old life whose name I can say now without the weather changing. Not because I hate her. Hate is just love with a fever, and it keeps her living in your head rent-free. Because I got over her. All the way over. That's the destination, friend. Not revenge, not her regret, not winning the breakup. Indifference, and a rebuilt man standing in it. So here's how we'll do this. First, I'm going to take you through the collapse. Mine, and probably some of yours, because this thing runs on rails, and your crash and my crash are the same crash with different names in it. Then the floor, and what almost happened there, because somebody has to talk to men about that part, and it might as well be a man who's seen it from both sides of the stretcher. Then the part nobody else will do with you, the pattern, because here's a confession to hold on to until we get there. Lauren was not the first woman to leave me, she was the sixth. Before her, there were years of first dates that never became second dates, and relationships that all died at about month 5 with the same speech, and until I was willing to study that record like a case file, instead of a run of bad luck, I was always going to end up back on this floor. Then the climb. Every tool, every mistake, in the order they actually worked. Skip nothing. Chapter 1 starts on a Tuesday, at my own kitchen table, over spaghetti going cold, 11 words in, when the woman I'd built my whole nervous system around said the sentence that ended my first life. Let's go get your second one. Chapter 1. The Tuesday she stopped loving me. In my line of work we have a phrase, the mechanism of injury. It's the first thing you assess rolling up on a scene before you touch anybody, because the mechanism tells you what to look for. A car into a tree at 30 tells one story. The same car at 70 tells another. When the new guys train with me, I teach them that the body lies, the patient lies, God love them. They'll tell you they're fine with a femur in 2 pieces, but the mechanism never lies. Figure out what actually hit them, how fast, from what angle, and you'll know what's broken before the x-ray does. So here is my mechanism of injury, as precisely as I can reconstruct it, because you deserve precision, and because I've noticed that men who've been through this can't stop repeating their version of this scene to anyone who'll listen, and there's a reason. The mind goes back to the crash site. It's trying to find the moment the wheel got pulled, because if it can find the moment, maybe it can undo it. You can undo it. But we're going to visit mine once, properly, and then we're going to stop circling. It was a Tuesday in January. I'd worked a day shift that had one bad call in it. A kid on a bike, he made it. But those stay in your hands for a few hours afterward. And I came home wanting exactly what I always wanted after a shift like that, which was noise. Family noise. My daughter Maya was 6 then, and she was at the table doing the kind of homework 6-year-olds do, which is mostly negotiating, and Lauren had made spaghetti, and I remember thinking, walking in, smelling that, hearing Maya arguing the case for why tracing counted as writing. I remember thinking the actual sentence, this is the whole point of everything. I want you to hold that. Whatever you think of me by the end of this book, whatever I got wrong in that house, and I got plenty wrong, I walked into that kitchen, a man who knew exactly what he had. That's not the tragedy the movies sell, the oblivious husband who never noticed his life. I noticed. I just thought noticing was the same as keeping it. Maya went to bed at 8. Lauren did the routine with her. Teeth, book, water, the whole liturgy, and I cleaned the kitchen. And when she came back down, she didn't turn the TV on. That was the first anomaly, if I'm reading the run sheet, honestly. 12 years, and I could tell you our whole evening protocol without looking. She sat down across from me at the table, which we never did after dinner. The table was for eating and homework. The couch was for us. And she folded her hands, and she looked at them, not at me, and she said, "I have to tell you something, and I need you to let me get all the way through it." And I knew. I want to be honest about that, because the story I told everyone for the first year was that it came out of absolutely nowhere. Total blindside. Clear sky, and that story was true from the neck up. But the body knew before the ears did. I've watched 100 family members stand in hallways while I worked on someone they loved, and there is a stillness that comes over a human being in the second before the news arrives, the body going quiet so it can take the hit, and my body did that at my own kitchen table before she'd said anything but a sentence about sentences. My hands went cold. The room got very specific. I can still tell you where every object on that table was. The salt, her phone face down, Maya's pencil with the unicorn eraser chewed off. She said, "I love you. But I'm not in love with you anymore. And I haven't been for a long time, and I've really tried, and I can't keep pretending. It isn't fair to either of us." Or to Maya. 11 words in the middle there. "I love you, but I'm not in love with you anymore." If you've heard your version of them, you know that everything after is just packing material. And if you haven't heard them yet, I need you to know what they actually are, because I didn't, and the not knowing cost me months. I thought they were the opening bid in a negotiation. I thought they were a fire alarm, and fire alarms are what I do. Fire alarms mean somebody competent shows up and runs the protocol and the building gets saved. I actually felt, under the ice water in my chest, a little jolt of that shift change adrenaline. Okay, this is bad, but it's finally in front of me. We can work the problem. I said something like that. I said, okay, thank you for telling me. We can fix this. Counseling, whatever it takes. I'll change the schedule. I'll drop the overtime. Tell me what you need me to be, and I'll be it. Tell me what you need me to be, and I'll be it. Write that sentence down, gentlemen, because we're going to perform an autopsy on it in a later chapter. There is no sentence in the English language that a woman in Lauren's position wants to hear less, and I said it with my whole sincere heart, and I watched it land on her face like one more piece of luggage she'd already decided not to carry. She didn't get angry. That was the worst part, the part I'd replay for a year. She looked at me with something I can only call gentleness, with the current turned off, and she said, "I know you would. That's not the problem." And I said, "Then what is the problem? Tell me the problem." And she was quiet for a long time, and then she said the thing that I now consider the truest sentence spoken in that house in years. She said, "You didn't do anything. That's not why. There's no reason I can hand you that will make this make sense tonight. I'm just done. And I've been done for longer than you want to know. I've been done for longer than you want to know." We'll spend the whole next chapter inside that sentence, because it turns out it was the key to everything. The reason she was calm while I was drowning, the reason she'd seem fine in the months ahead while I lost 20 pounds, the reason nothing I did after that night had any chance of working. But that night I couldn't hear it. That night I did what you probably did, or what you'll be tempted to do. I argued. Not angry arguing, worse, competent arguing, paramedic arguing. I treated her heart like a call I could run. I asked assessment questions. "Since when? Is there someone else?" She said no, and I believed her. Hold that thought too. Is it the shifts? Is it your mother? Is it money? I offered interventions, counseling, a trip, a move. I actually said the words we could move. As if geography was the problem. As if the marriage had a fracture you could splint. She sat there and took all of it, patient as weather, and somewhere around midnight she said, "I'm going to sleep in the office," and she went up the stairs, and I sat in that kitchen until 3 a.m, and I want to tell you exactly what I did there, because it was the first symptom of the disease this whole book is about. I got out a legal pad, and I made a list titled, and I'm quoting the document, "Plan to Save Us," and it had 19 items on it, and item 1 was, "Listen more," and item 7 was, "Flowers, not just occasions," and item 14, I swear this is true, item 14 was, "Be more spontaneous," written on a legal pad at 3 a.m, in numbered order, by a man whose wife had just told him she'd been gone for years. I found that legal pad in a box last spring, 8 years later, and I read the whole list standing in my garage, and I didn't cry, which is how I knew this book was ready to be written. But I'll tell you what I felt instead, and it's maybe the most important thing I can hand you from this side of the canyon. I felt tenderness for that poor son of a bitch at the kitchen table. Because he wasn't stupid. He was doing the only thing he knew, which was to treat the worst pain of his life like a solvable emergency. Because if it was an emergency, then it had a protocol. And if it had a protocol, then somewhere on that legal pad was the item that would bring her back. And the truth that took me 2 years and cost me almost everything to accept, is the thesis of this book's whole first half, so here it is, in the open, where you can hate it in advance. There was no item. There is no item. By the time a woman says those 11 words to you, you are not at the beginning of the emergency, you are at the end of it. The crash you're standing in didn't happen tonight, it happened in slow motion over years. In 100 quiet moments neither of you flagged. And she has already done her bleeding, done her grieving, done her leaving. All of it internally, all of it while sleeping next to you. And what you are hearing tonight is not the alarm. It's the coroner's report. That's why she's calm. That's why she's kind. That's why nothing on the legal pad matters. You cannot resuscitate someone who has been gone for years. And you especially cannot do it by promising to become whoever they need. Because, and here's the razor blade hidden in that apple, a man with no shape of his own is a large part of how the patient died in the first place. She was gone by morning, to her sister's, with a bag she must have packed days before. That detail also matters. Packed days before. And the house made a sound I'd never heard it make, which was nothing. And I stood in my kitchen holding a legal pad, 38 years old, about to make every mistake this book will now walk you through. But first I have to answer the question that was eating me alive that morning, the one that's probably eating you. How was she so calm? How was she already fine? You'll see her or her social media in the coming weeks, laughing somewhere, glowing somewhere, while you can't keep food down, and every man in history has drawn the same conclusion from that sight: she never loved me at all. You'll be wrong. It's stranger than that, and colder, and once you understand the real mechanics of it, the timeline she was living while you were living yours, you'll stop taking her calm as a verdict on your worth. That's next. Chapter 2. The Walkaway Timeline. 6 weeks after she left, on a Saturday I didn't have Maya, I saw Lauren at a farmer's market. She didn't see me. She was standing at a flower stall in a green jacket I'd never seen before, holding coffee, laughing at something the vendor said, and her head went back when she laughed, that full laugh. The one I'd been trying to get out of her for the last 3 years of our marriage and couldn't. I stood there between the bread stand and a guy selling honey, unshaven, 15 pounds down, sleeping 4 hours a night, a man who 3 days earlier had cried in the ambulance bay because a song came on, and I watched my wife laugh like the world was easy, and I went home and did the worst math a man can do. She's fine, I'm dying. Therefore I never mattered to her at all. Therefore 12 years were a lie. If this book does nothing else for you, I wanted to take that math away from you, because I have since learned it's the most common calculation in male heartbreak, and it is wrong from the first line. And worse than wrong, it's poison, because both of the places it leads are prisons. Follow it one way and you land in worthlessness. She never loved me. I'm the kind of man a woman can pretend to love for a decade, and that thought puts men on floors. Follow it the other way and you land in the corner of the internet that will tell you no woman has ever loved any man, they love what he provides, and we'll visit that neighborhood honestly in a later chapter, because they've got a few things right and a lot of arsenic mixed in. The actual truth is simpler and stranger than either prison, and I got it handed to me by, of all people, my station captain, Gus, a man who'd been divorced twice and remarried once, and who you'll be seeing a lot in this book. I was sitting in the office trying to explain the farmer's market to him, the laugh, the green jacket, and Gus listened the way he listens, like a man weighing freight, and then he said, "Son, what day did your marriage end?" And I said, "January 9th. And he said, "No. That's the day she told you. When did it end? When did it end?" I want to walk you through what that question did, because answering it was the first real forensic work I did on my own life. And it's work you're going to have to do on yours, so watch the method. I stopped asking when did I lose her, which was a question about a moment, and started asking when was she last actually in it, which is a question about a timeline. And the timeline, once I finally looked at it like an investigator instead of a widower, told a completely different story than the one I'd been grieving. The dead giveaway was the bag. I told you she left the morning after the spaghetti with a bag she'd already packed. You don't pack a bag in a marriage you decided to leave at dinner. You pack that bag after weeks of arithmetic, after you've priced apartments on your lunch break, and called your sister and said the words out loud in a parked car to hear how they sound. Then I kept going, backward, run sheet by run sheet. The gym. She'd joined 14 months before January, and I'd cheered it genuinely, proud of her, and it had worked. She looked better that last year than she had in 5. Now, there is a version of this observation that curdles into paranoia, and I want to be careful. Women are allowed to get in shape. It's not a conspiracy. But a woman rebuilding her body while going quiet inside a marriage is not decorating your house, gentlemen. Sometimes she's packing it. The girl's trips that got longer. The phone that migrated, over about a year, from the coffee table to her pocket to face down to locked. A migration so gradual you could never point at a single day. The fights that stopped. I used to brag about that. God help me, I told my brother Danny. We never even fight anymore. Like a man bragging that the smoke detector finally quit making noise. I know now what I'd tell any man who says that to me. Fighting is a vital sign. A woman who's still fighting with you is still negotiating with you, still trying to get something from you, which means she still believes there's something in you worth getting. The arguing stops when the asking stops, and the asking stops when she concludes the man in front of her is never going to hear it. Silence in a marriage isn't peace, half the time. It's a chart getting closed. and the bedroom. I'm not going to be graphic. My daughter might hear this someday, but this book is worthless if I lie to you, so. The last 2 years, it had gone from a language we spoke to, a chore she scheduled to, finally, a thing that had a birthday and an anniversary, and otherwise did not exist, and I had filed all of it under stress, under she's tired, under it's a phase, under the great male file cabinet of things we do not look at directly because looking might require a conversation we don't have the tools for. Here's what I understand now. Desire is usually the first system to go offline, and it goes quietly, and by the time it's been dark for 2 years, the grief inside her is already well underway. Which brings me to the sentence I promised we'd sit inside. I've been done for longer than you want to know. Here's the mechanism, and it has a name in the research. They call it the walkaway wife pattern, but I'll give it to you the way I finally saw it. A woman in a long relationship almost never leaves the way a man does, in an explosion, over an event. She leaves the way a glacier melts. Somewhere, years back, there was a season where she was still trying. Loudly, maybe. The season, one remembered as her being impossible to please. The nagging season. The season one answered with sighs and half-fixes and a paramedic's favorite move, downgrading the call. It's not that serious, we're fine. What I could not see, because I was managing each little conversation instead of reading the trend line, was that those complaints were the marriage's last vital signs. She wasn't nagging me, she was coding, and I kept hitting snooze on the monitor. And then one day the complaints stopped, and I called it peace, and what it actually was the moment she gave up and switched from fixing the marriage to surviving it, and then, quietly, to leaving it. From that day forward, while I was living in what I thought was a calm marriage, she was living in a departure lounge, grieving, detaching, rehearsing, pricing the exit, watching me across the dinner table, the way you look at a country you've already decided to emigrate from, with a little sadness, a little guilt, and no intention whatsoever of unpacking. That, friend, is why she's calm, and you're destroyed. Not because she's cold, not because she never loved you, and because she's fine, but because you two are at completely different points on the same road. Her grief is mostly behind her. She did it in installments, on her side of the bed, at red lights, in the shower, for 2 or 3 years, while you start yours from zero the night she tells you, with no warning, and the wind knocked out of you. She's not ahead of you because she's heartless. She's ahead of you because she left first and told you last. When you finally absorb that, and it took me most of a year, 2 things happen. The farmer's market stops being evidence that you never mattered, and something colder arrives to replace the worthlessness, a question with actual teeth. If she was gone for 2 years before she said a word, what the hell was I doing that whole time? What was I looking at? That question is the door to the most valuable and most brutal work in this book, and I'll take you through it when we get to the pattern. Because for me, the answer turned out to be bigger than one marriage. It ran back through every woman who ever left me, and there were, I mentioned, 5 before her. But not yet. Because I have to tell you about Todd first. June, 5 months after the spaghetti. Maya, 6 years old, in the bathtub at my new apartment, playing with a boat, says, without looking up, Mommy's friend Todd has a truck with a ladder rack. A truck with a ladder rack. I ran that name through everything, like a man checking a security tape. Todd from her gym. Todd, who, when I did the math on a few things she'd said, and a receipt, and a night in October, months before the spaghetti, when her phone lit up on the counter at 11:40 and she took it onto the porch in January cold, Todd, whose timeline, once I assembled it, did not start in June, I'll never have the full forensics, and I've stopped wanting them, but I'll give you the honest version instead of the comfortable one, because you may be about to assemble a timeline of your own, and you should hear this standing up. Women very rarely jump out of a marriage into open air. They climb out onto something. Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's just a scaffolding of possibilities, attention from the gym, a rehearsal audience of girlfriends, a flirtation that proves the market still wants her, but by the time she says the 11 words, the next branch is usually already load-tested. The forums call it monkey branching, and they say it with a snarl. I'm going to say it flatter than that, because I promised you honest over angry. It isn't a conspiracy against you. It's how exits actually happen, for humans, when leaving feels survivable only with somewhere to land. But it does mean this. The whole time you're begging her to come back, and we're about to spend a chapter on the begging, you are very likely not talking to a free agent weighing her options. You're a man performing CPR on someone who's already been claimed by another hospital. And nothing you promise, nothing on your legal pad, gentlemen, competes with new, 'cause you're not bidding against Todd. You're bidding against a version of herself. She gets to be with Todd, the one with the laugh from the farmer's market, and that woman doesn't exist in your house anymore, and no amount of flowers, spontaneity, or listening more brings her back through that door. I learned all of this too late to save my dignity. What I did with the 6 weeks after she left is the chapter I least wanted to write, and the one you probably need most, because you have a letter in you right now. I'd bet my truck on it, 9 pages, explaining everything, and you think it's different from mine. It isn't. Come watch me deliver it. Chapter 3. The Begging Weeks. Every profession has its videos. In mine, they show you dash cam footage of medics doing it wrong, standing in traffic, backing into things. And the point isn't to shame anybody. The point is that watching someone else do it wrong builds a reflex in you that a lecture never will. So this chapter is my dash cam footage. 6 weeks of it. I'm going to show you a competent, respected, 40-year-old-ish man reduce himself to something I still flinch to describe, and I need you to watch every second of it, not because the humiliation is entertaining, though my brother Danny would argue otherwise, but because you have some version of this 6 weeks loaded in the chamber right now, and the only thing that might stop you from firing it is watching exactly how it played for me. Week 1, I flooded her phone. Not angry texts, worse. Thoughtful ones, long ones. I'd compose them on shift between calls, polish them like they were going in a museum. Memories, apologies, insights I was having in real time about myself, each one engineered to show her how much I was growing. She'd answer maybe 1 in 5, kindly, briefly, the way you answer a child, and I mind each reply like scripture. She said, "Thanks for understanding. That means she still cares. Boys, pack it up. We're back in business." I know men reading this are nodding. That 2-word reply economy, where you're spending 800 words to buy back 10, that's not a conversation, that's a slot machine. And she wasn't feeding it out of love, she was feeding it out of guilt, and guilt has a short tank. Week 2, the grand gesture started. Flowers to her sister's, where she was staying. Her favorite bakery thing left on the porch, with a note. I rebuilt, and I want you to sit with this one. I rebuilt the cedar bench she'd asked me to fix for 2 years and never got. Our whole marriage, she asked, and it sat broken in the garage. And the week after she left me, I stayed up 2 nights building it like a shrine, and had it delivered. Delivered to a house she was living in specifically to be away from me. My best friend at the station, a medic named D, who you'll meet properly later, watched me load that bench into a truck and said, quietly, "You know what that bench says to her, right? It says the whole time you had me, I could have been like this, and I chose not to be until you left." I told her she didn't understand romance. D was right, of course. Every grand gesture after a walkaway is an accidental confession. You are not proving what you'll become. You are itemizing what you withheld. Week 4 was the letter. 9 pages, handwritten, because I'd read somewhere that handwritten mattered. I still have it. She gave it back eventually, which tells you something all by itself, and last year I made myself reread it as research for this book. With 8 years of distance, and I'm going to do something now that's either brave or stupid, I'm going to summarize my own 9 pages for you, honestly. Page 1 and 2, the museum tour. Remember Yosemite, remember the night Maya was born, remember who we were. Pages 3 through 5, the confession of faults, an absolute yard sale of self-blame. Everything I could think of laid out on the lawn. I was distant, I was tired. I chose overtime. I stopped courting you. Some of it true, all of it strategic. Because watch the move, gentlemen. I was confessing my way toward a verdict. See how aware I am now. Awareness this complete surely deserves a second chance. Pages 6 and 7, the promises, the legal pad in paragraph form, counseling, presents, date nights, the man I will become. Page 8, and I want to be sick typing this. Page 8 was the plea. The actual word beg appears on page 8. I wrote, I am begging you to the mother of my child, in cursive. And page 9, the closer I was proudest of, no pressure, take all the time you need, I'll wait, I'm not going anywhere. I delivered it to her car under the windshield wiper like a parking ticket, with sunflowers, because roses felt like I was trying too hard. Now, what did all this actually do on the receiving end? Because here's what I believed, and here's what every begging man believes. Somewhere under the strategy, I believed love was a quantity problem. She'd lost sight of how much I loved her, so if I could just demonstrate enough volume, enough proof, the scales would tip back. But attraction, and this is the physics lesson of this whole miserable chapter, attraction is not moved by volume, it's moved by weight. And a man in pursuit of a woman who has already left him weighs nothing. Every text lowered my mass. Every gesture, every page of that letter arrived at her sister's house and said the same single sentence underneath its 1,000 words. I have no self without you. Please give me back myself. And I need you to understand what that sentence does inside a woman who left specifically because, in her words, there was no one home to leave. It doesn't touch her heart. It touches her guilt, briefly, and then it confirms her verdict. She didn't leave a cruel man, remember. She left an empty one, hollowed out by his own agreeableness, and here he was on paper, 9 pages of empty, offering to become whatever shape she ordered. The letter wasn't evidence against her decision. It was the decision, notarized. She called 2 days later. My heart did things no cardiac monitor should see. And she was kind, she was so kind, and that phone call is where I finally got the data every begging man eventually gets if he pushes long enough. She said, I read it, and I'm sorry. But you're making this so much harder. You're making this harder. 4 words, and they land like a diagnosis. Because you suddenly hear yourself the way she hears you, not as a romantic laying siege to reclaim his love, but as a weight she is trying to set down that keeps grabbing her hands. And then she said, the thing that finally cracked me, she said, I need you to stop. If you love me, stop. And there it is, the checkmate the begging always arrives at. She had taken my only remaining move, the I love you, and converted it into the argument for silence. If you love me, stop. There's nowhere to go from there. A man can rage against go away, But if you love me, stop turns your own engine against you. Did I stop? Almost. Mostly. I'll confess the last incident, because I promised you the whole tape. 3 weeks after the letter, a bad Friday, 2 glasses of bourbon, and I drove past her sister's house. Just drove past, I told myself. It's a public road. Todd's truck, the ladder rack, was in the driveway, and I parked up the street in the dark. A 38-year-old paramedic parked in the dark like a man on a stakeout, heart going like I was the emergency, staring at a lit kitchen window where the shapes of 2 people were moving around each other in that easy way people move when they're new, and somewhere in minute 20 it was like coming up from underwater into freezing air. I saw myself. From outside, a man parked in the dark watching a window. There's a word for that man, and it isn't heartbroken, and the distance between heartbroken and that word is about 4 more bad Fridays, and I drove home shaking, and I never went back. I'm telling you about minute 20 because some of you are 1 bad Friday from that curb right now, and I want you to have my freezing air in advance. There is no information at that window. There is no version of you that leaves that curb better than you arrived. And in the age of the phone, the curb is portable. Every 2 a.m. scroll through her tagged photos is the same parked car, the same lit window, the same man getting smaller in the dark. We'll deal with the phone properly in the no contact chapter, and it'll take a whole chapter because that addiction is real and I had it bad. Here's what I want you to take out of the wreckage of my 6 weeks, 3 things, and then I'll show you where the road actually went, because it went down before it went up. First, the begging is not love. I know it feels like love. It feels like the purest love you've ever produced, but grade the mechanism, not the feeling. It's withdrawal. She was a 12-year drug, and your nervous system is on fire, and it will say anything. Build any bench, write any page, to get 1 more dose. You are not wooing. You are drug-seeking, and she can tell, because desperation smells identical, whatever it's begging for. Second, every act of pursuit past the point of her decision transfers power you will bitterly need later, because recovering respect, hers, and more importantly yours, is the longest part of this whole road, and each artifact of the begging weeks, each text, each letter, is a promissory note against your future self-respect that comes due in year 2, when you're better and something reminds you of page 8, and you flinch so hard you have to leave the room. Save your future self that flinch tax, or at least keep the balance low. And third, the hardest one. If, like me, you look up from the begging and realize the pattern is older than this woman, that you have now begged, chased, or white-knuckled the exit of more than 1 leaving woman in your life, then mark it, quietly, in the case file, because that's not heartbreak anymore, that's a syndrome, and we will get to it, I promise. Chapter 8 has your name on it. She stopped answering entirely after the "If you love me, stop" call. Radio silence, on advice of her sister and, I'd learn later, a lawyer. And with the begging lane closed, a man has to go somewhere, and where I went was down. Further than I'd ever been, further than I've ever admitted out loud until this recording. The next chapter is the one my brother asked me not to write. It's in the book because the statistics say some man listening needs it to be. If that's you, stay with me. Especially you. Chapter 4. The Floor. My brother Danny asked me to leave this chapter out. He said, "You've got a daughter. You've got a career. People look up to you. Nobody needs to know how far down it went." And I told him what I'll tell you. In my 24 years on an ambulance, the calls that end worst are almost never the ones where somebody knew it was bad. They're the ones where nobody said anything because saying it felt shameful, and everybody stood around being polite while a man died of politeness. I'm not doing polite. Men die of this particular injury. They die of it at a rate nobody wants to put on a greeting card, and they die of it quietly, 6, 8, 10 months in, usually right about the time everyone around them has decided they seem better. So Danny, I love you, but this chapter stays. Here's what the floor looked like. First the outside, then the inside. Outside. By month 4, I had lost 23 pounds, and not the good way, the gray way, belt holes and cheekbones, the way that makes other medics look at you a half-second too long in the equipment room. I was sleeping in fragments, 2 hours, 90 minutes, waking at 3 a.m. with my heart slamming like a door in the wind, reaching for the phone before my eyes were open. And we'll talk about what the phone was doing to me. That deserves its own chapter. Bourbon had moved from the weekend to the weeknight to a water glass while I microwaved whatever dinner was. And I want to be precise about the drinking, because men lie to themselves here with units. It wasn't the amount. It was the job description. Alcohol had been promoted from beverage to anesthesia. I wasn't drinking for taste or company. I was drinking to make consciousness stop at 11 instead of 1, and any substance that's been given that job, in any amount, is a hole in the boat. And the work. This is the part that still scares me. I was, by reputation, one of the steadier medics in the county, and on a Tuesday in May, I drew up the wrong concentration of a cardiac drug for a 71-year-old man, and I was one cross-check away from pushing it. My partner D caught it. Routine catch, that's why the cross-check exists. Nobody died. Nobody was ever in real danger. I can say all the right procedural sentences. But I stood in the back of that rig, knowing what I'd almost done, and knowing why, because my hands were doing medicine while my head was at a farmer's market watching a green jacket laugh, and that night in the station parking lot, Dee sat with me on the tailgate and said, without any drama at all, you're not okay, and everybody knows you're not okay, and you're the only one still performing the version where you're okay. Write that on your wall, whoever's listening. The people around a drowning man usually know before he does. The performance fools nobody but the performer. Now the inside, because the outside was just weather. The inside was the thing. There is a specific arithmetic that starts running in a man's head somewhere past month 3 of this, and it runs at night, and it runs quietly, and I'm going to say it out loud, plainly and carefully, because the whole power of this arithmetic depends on it never being said out loud. It goes like this. I've lost a woman, so the past is ash. She took the future too, the retirements, the trips, the porch we were going to grow old on, so the future is fog. My kid sees me 4 days out of 14 and cried at drop-off last time, so I'm failing the one thing left. Everyone at work knows I'm cracked. I'm tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, and every single day costs more than it pays. And then the arithmetic produces its conclusion, and the conclusion always wears sensible clothes. That's the tell almost nobody warns you about. It doesn't arrive screaming. It arrives calm, reasonable, almost administrative. Everyone would be sadder for a while, but better in the long run. Maya's young, she'd heal, Lauren's guilt would fade, the guys would manage. It presents itself as the last competent decision available to a man who has run out of competent decisions. If a version of that sentence has ever crossed your mind in its sensible close, I need you to hear a paramedic tell you what he knows from the other side of it. From the scenes I've stood in, the hallways full of people I've had to walk past afterward. Nobody heals. Nobody manages. It is not administration, it is amputation without consent, and the people left holding it hold it forever, and the 6-year-old holds it longest of all. The arithmetic is a liar. It is the injury doing the math, not you. For me, it never became a plan, and I want to be exact about that, exact the way we'd charted. What it became was a Thursday night in June, alone in that beige apartment, 3 bourbons down, sitting on the floor against the kitchen cabinets at 2 a.m. because chairs felt like too much participation in the world, running the arithmetic with the lights off. And what broke the spell, I wish I could tell you it was strength or a vision of my daughter, but it was dumber and more human than that. My phone rang. Work ringtone. A shift swap request, of all the stupid ordinary things. Some medic needing his Saturday covered, and I sat there staring at the screen, at proof that somewhere out in the dark the ordinary world was still running, still assuming I existed in it, still asking things of me, and something about being needed for a Saturday at 2 a.m. by a man who had no idea what he just interrupted, put one crack in the arithmetic. I didn't take the shift, I took the crack. I called Danny at 2:15 in the morning, and when he answered, half asleep, alarmed, I couldn't say any of the vocabulary. What I said was, I'm not doing so good, which is, I've since learned, the exact phrase men use. The whole language shrinks down to that, and here's the thing about my brother that I'll owe him for until one of us is in the ground. He didn't counsel me, he didn't quote anything. He said, don't move, and he drove 40 minutes in a t-shirt in the middle of the night, and he sat on my kitchen floor with me until the sun came up, mostly not talking, and in the morning he made eggs and said, okay, here's what's happening now. And there was no discussion about it. What happened now was Gus. Danny knew him from department barbecues, knew he'd been through 2 divorces, and he did the thing men almost never do for each other. He brokered it. He called Gus and said, my brother needs your kitchen table. And Gus said Sunday. And that Sunday, over coffee gone cold, I gave my captain the whole tape, the arithmetic included, because Danny had made me promise, and Gus listened all the way out. And then he said the sentence this book was almost named after. He said, son, you've spent 20 years pulling other people out of wrecks. You're the one in the wreck now. You're on the stretcher. And every rule you know applies to you. And I said, meaning it, what rules? And he counted them off on his fingers like a man who'd thought about it for years, because somebody had done it for him in his second divorce, and I'm going to give them to you the way he gave them to me. 1. Stop the bleeding before anything else. In this wreck, the bleeding is contact with her. Every text, every scroll, every drive-by opens the artery again. We'll spend a whole chapter there. 2. The patient doesn't get to refuse transport. Meaning, you're going to a professional, and that's not a debate. And I went. And we'll talk about what actual therapy did and didn't do for me, honestly. No halo on it. 3. No major decisions in the acute phase. You don't quit the job, sell the house, move to Alaska, or pick a new woman while you're still in shock. The judgment is injured too, it just doesn't show up on the x-ray. 4. Vitals first, meaning first, sleep, food, sunlight, movement, before meaning, before closure, before any philosophy. You can't do soul work in a body that's running on bourbon, and 4 hours of sleep, the machinery for it is physically offline. And 5, and he leaned on this one, no man survives this solo, not because you're weak, because the injury lives in the exact organ you'd use to fight it alone. Your own head is the compromised equipment, son. You need outside instruments. That's not philosophy, that's just avionics. I want to close this chapter by talking directly, for 1 minute, to the man in the sensible clothes arithmetic, because statistically he's here in the audience right now, and he's been listening to all of this very quietly. Brother, I'm not going to give you a poster. I'm going to give you the 3 things that were true for me and are true for you. First, the arithmetic feels permanent and is not. It is a symptom with a timeline, like fever. It crests and it breaks. And the single most important thing you can do is refuse to act during the fever. And the way you refuse is you get one other human being into the room tonight, and I don't care how you say it. I'm not doing so good works fine. It worked for me. Second, if there is genuinely no one, there are men and women who answer phones all night for exactly this. In most countries, you can find a crisis line in 10 seconds, and I need you to file that, not as a service for other people, weaker people, but as what it actually is, a shift swap call at 2 a.m., the ordinary world interrupting the arithmetic, and interruption is all it takes. The spell doesn't survive witnesses. And third, hear this from a man 8 years down the road that you cannot currently see even 1 week down. Everything the arithmetic told you was ash and fog was wrong. All of it. The life on the far side of this is not a patched up version of the old one. It's a different life, bigger in ways I'm going to spend the back half of this book describing, and it is worth every day of the fever it costs to reach. And the woman it's about, I promise you, will one day be a name that doesn't change the weather. Gus's rules put a floor under the floor. But rules stop a fall, they don't heal a wound, and the wound still had to be gone through, not around, and going through it meant learning things about grief, male grief specifically, that nobody had ever taught me, starting with why I could cry at a dog food commercial but not at my own divorce. That's next. Chapter 5. Feel It or Wear It. The therapist Gus made me see was a woman named Dr. Okafor, and I went in armored. I want to admit that up front, because half the men listening will go in armored too, if they go at all. I sat down in her office, with my arms crossed, like I was guarding a scene, and I gave her the version of events I'd give a supervisor, chronological, factual, self-aware, in that rehearsed way that's actually the opposite of aware, and she listened to about 10 minutes of it, and then she asked me a question I've since asked a dozen broken men because of what it did to me. She said, "When's the last time you cried about any of this?" And I said, proudly, that I was more of a keep moving guy. And she nodded slowly, wrote nothing down, and said, "Okay, so where does it go? Where does it go?" 4 words. And they cracked the armor faster than a month of sympathy would have, because I knew the answer. I just had never let the answer stand in good light. I knew exactly where it went, because I'd been watching where it went for 4 months. It went into the 3 A.M. heart slam. It went into the bourbon's new job description. It went into the drug I almost pushed, into the weight I couldn't keep on, into a temper with Maya over a spilled cup that scared us both, into my lower back seizing for no orthopedic reason, into 2 speeding tickets in 5 weeks from a man who drives an ambulance for a living. Grief that isn't felt doesn't evaporate, gentlemen. It's not steam. It's sewage. Deny it a pipe and it comes up through the floor, somewhere else, on its own schedule, dressed as something you'd never connect to her. An ulcer, a bar fight, a DUI, a rage at a referee. And my profession has a morbid saying that fits, one I'd repeated for years without applying it to myself. The body keeps the books. You can refuse to feel it, but then you're going to wear it. That's the whole chapter title, and it might be the most important sentence in this book for the specific way men break. Feel it or wear it. There is no third door. Now here's the thing nobody had ever explained to me, and I'm a man who'd taken every mandatory debriefing after every dead kid for 2 decades, so believe me when I say the system doesn't teach this, even to professionals. I didn't know how to feel it. That sounds absurd. It's the truth. Somewhere around age 10, most of us got handed the same 2-item toolkit for pain, anger, which is allowed, and fine, which is mandatory, and every other feeling got routed through one of those two. So when the biggest grief of my adult life arrived, a grief with fear in it, and shame in it, and abandonment in it, and love with nowhere to land in it, I stood in front of it, holding a hammer and a smiley face, and no wonder the sewage backed up. What Dr. Okafor actually taught me, the real clinical work, sounds embarrassingly small when I say it, and it changed everything, so I'll say it anyway. She taught me to sit in a chair, no phone, no bourbon, no radio, and let the wave come, and name it out loud while it went through. That's it. That's the technology. The first time I did it properly, week 6 of seeing her, something she said knocked a brick loose, and I cried in that office the way I hadn't cried since I was a boy, ugly, hiccuping, cop outside the door crying, and I remember being certain, mid-collapse, that it would never stop, that if I let this start it would kill me, and that certainty, she told me after, is the exact lie that keeps men dry-eyed and dying. It stopped in about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. The wave that I'd been running from for half a year, that I'd nearly bled out avoiding, was 4 minutes long, and when it passed I felt something I hadn't felt since January, which was quiet. The monster's whole power was in staying unfought. Waves, it turns out, are survivable. It's the running that drowns you. So let me give you Grief Mechanics for Men, the field version, everything I know now that I didn't know then. First, it comes in waves, not weather, and the waves have triggers, and you should map yours like hazards on a route sheet. Mine were, in order of lethality, the song, you know how songs work, I had to retire 3 of them for a year. The grocery store, specifically the cereal aisle, because you will find yourself reaching for what a 6-year-old likes on the wrong week. Sundays, whole day, radioactive. And smell. God, nobody warned you about smell. A stranger walked past me in a hardware store wearing whatever Lauren wore, and I had to stand in the fastener aisle gripping a shelf like a man on a listing boat. Map them. Not to avoid them forever, you can't, but so the wave stops being an ambush. Because an ambush says something's wrong with me, I'm going backward, and a mapped wave just says, cereal aisle, right on schedule, breathe, and one of those responses spirals, and the other one passes in 4 minutes. Second, know the difference between grieving and rehearsing. This one took me months. Sitting with the wave, feeling it, naming it, that's grieving. That drains the wound. Replaying the farmer's market for the 40th time. Re-arguing the kitchen table with better lines. Rereading her old texts as literature. That's not grief, that's rehearsal. That's picking the stitches open to check if the wound's still there. It's still there. The line between them is simple. Grief visits the past and comes back. Rumination moves in and changes the locks. When you catch yourself running the same tape past the second lap, and you will, stand up, physically stand up. That's not woo-woo. State follows the body, and give your hands a task, which is why God invented garages. Third, and I'm going to be blunt, because the market for this book is men. Every shortcut is a loan shark. Every one. The bourbon, we covered. The porn, and its algorithmic cousin. The endless scroll, same mechanism. Borrowed relief at brutal interest, numbing the exact receptors you need online to heal. The revenge fantasies, sugar high, crash included. And the big one, The one your buddies will literally cheer for. The fast rebound. The get under to get over program. I ran that program. Month 6, her name was Kim, and I'll tell that story properly in the dating chapter. But the summary belongs here. Using a new woman as anesthesia doesn't skip the grief. It just adds a casualty and a delay. And you wake up month 9 having outsourced your pain to someone who didn't ask for the job. And the original invoice still comes due, now with her hurt added on. The rule Gus gave me was crude and correct. If you can't sit alone in your own apartment on a Friday night without climbing the walls, you have no business inflicting yourself on anybody new. Heal first. Date from surplus, not from hemorrhage. 4th, the timeline, because every man asks and everybody dodges. The honest answer is it's proportional, and it's longer than the movies and shorter than the fear. The old barroom rule of thumb, a month for every year, turned out weirdly close for me. 12 years took me a bit over a year to genuinely metabolize, and the fear at month 2 was that it would take forever, and forever was wrong, and so was my buddy who promised 6 weeks. But here's the part that matters more than the number. It is not linear. Nobody tells you this, and it wrecks men. Month 5 can be better, and month 7 can be a crater, one bad trigger, one photo you weren't braced for, and you're back on the kitchen floor, and you'll conclude the whole climb was fake. It wasn't fake. Healing from this graph's like a stock market recovery. Savage dips the whole way up, and the trend only shows if you zoom out. Judge yourself by quarters, never by nights. And 5th, the wound under the wound. Because somewhere in that year, in Okafor's office, doing this exact work, I noticed something that scared me more than the arithmetic ever had. The waves weren't all about Lauren. Some of them, when I actually sat in them and named what came, were older. There was one wave, week 10 maybe, that started with her green jacket and ended 4 minutes later at a memory of standing in a college parking lot at 22 watching a girl named Jess drive away, and the feeling was identical. Not similar, identical. Same frequency, same taste, like the same alarm going off in a different decade. And I said that to Okafor, kind of embarrassed. Why am I crying about a girl from 16 years ago? And she looked at me for a moment and said, "What makes you think it's about her either?" I didn't understand that sentence for another month. When I did understand it, it reorganized my entire past, because it meant this grief wasn't a one-car crash. It was the newest pileup at an intersection where I'd been crashing my whole adult life. Same corner, same weather, same driver, and Lauren was just the biggest vehicle. 5 women had left me before her, I told you that in the preface, and I'd filed each one under bad luck. Wrong girl, bad timing, women. Whatever file kept me from looking at the intersection. The begging weeks, the legal pad, the bench, the letter. None of it was invented for Lauren. It was a pattern with a 20-year service history, and before I could rebuild anything worth keeping, I had to do the thing I'd successfully avoided through 6 consecutive heartbreaks. I had to pull the maintenance records. But first, there was an artery still open. One Gus flagged on day 1, and until it got clamped, nothing else could even start. The phone. Her ghost lived in my phone, and I was visiting it 30 times a day. Next chapter, we clamp it. Chapter 6. No contact is not a game. Let me show you my phone, month 5. Her number, still labeled with the heart she typed into my contacts a decade ago. 3rd position in my favorites, because deleting it felt like a violence I wasn't ready for. Our text thread, 12 years deep, which I read at night the way other insomniacs read novels, scrolling up past the fights into the good years, 2 A.M. archaeology, digging for the exact stratum where we were last happy. Her social media, which I did not follow anymore, officially, I'd made a show of unfollowing, and which I visited manually between 6 and 30 times a day, and I know it was up to 30 because a screen time app eventually told me, and the app also told me the visits clustered between 11 p.m. and 3 A.M., which is exactly when you'd chart any other substance abuse. Photos, 4,000 of them in the cloud, that the phone itself with its little algorithmic cruelty kept resurfacing 1 year ago today. Hey, remember this beach? And the special exhibits. The voicemail from an ordinary Tuesday 2 years back. Hey, it's me, grab milk, love you. That I kept resaving because it was the last recording of a woman saying love you to me like it was nothing, like there was an infinite supply. That device was not a phone. It was a shrine with a data plan. And I was its priest. And every visit felt like relief and functioned like relapse. And if you take one sentence out of this chapter, take this one. You cannot heal from someone you're still checking on. Cannot. Not slower, not eventually, cannot, any more than you can sober up while sipping. And I need to kill the fantasy version of no contact first, because the internet sells a fantasy version and half of you have already bought it. The fantasy version is no contact as a play. Go dark. The theory runs, and your absence will do the seducing. She'll feel the silence, wonder what you're up to. The attraction will regrow in the vacuum, and around day 40, her name lights up your screen. That version is just the begging weeks wearing sunglasses. Your body's still at the window. You've just moved the curb inside your own head, and you're checking the driveway of her attention every hour. Day 9, nothing. Day 15, nothing. And when day 40 comes and goes silent, the crash is worse than the letter call, because you spend 40 days lighting hope like votive candles. And worse, God help you if it works. If the silence does flush out a text, and sometimes it does, we'll cover the text that comes in its own chapter. A man running no contact as a play will read that text as the door reopening, and he'll walk straight back in. And friend, nothing behind that door has changed. She didn't rediscover you in 40 days. She noticed the guilt lifting, or Todd wobbled, or she was bored on a Thursday. The play gets you nothing but a second funeral for the same person. Real no contact is not aimed at her at all. That's the whole difference. It's aimed at your own nervous system, and it rests on understanding what she actually is to you biochemically right now. Which is not a metaphor, it's the literature. They've put heartbroken people in brain scanners, and the regions that light up looking at the ex's photo are the craving circuits, the same neighborhood as cocaine. 12 years of daily dosing, oxytocin, routine, touch, her voice is background radiation, and then withdrawal, cold, involuntary, overnight. The 3 a.m. heart slam, the reaching for the phone before your eyes open, the inability to eat. That's not weakness of character. That's detox, chemically boring, predictable detox, and once I finally accepted that frame, everything reorganized. Because nobody argues about whether an addict should keep a little cocaine around for special occasions. Every scroll was a dose. Every drive past the shrine in my pocket was maintenance use. The voicemail was maintenance use. And the milestone that mattered wasn't her feeling my absence. It was the first 72 hours of actual abstinence, then the first week, then the shakes getting further apart, my nervous system slowly, physically, unlearning her as its primary supply. That's what no contact is for. It's not a message to her. It's a tourniquet for you. So here's the protocol I actually ran. Month 5, the day after Gus called the phone an open artery. Number deleted, and before you tell me you have it memorized, so did I. The point isn't amnesia. The point is friction. Every barrier between impulse and dose buys the 4 seconds the impulse needs to die. Thread archived off the device, not deleted. I'm not a barbarian. Exported to a drive, in a drawer, in the garage, where reading it requires an expedition instead of a reflex. Blocked her on everything and let me address the flinch, because I flinched. Blocking felt aggressive, felt like a statement, and isn't this pathetic, rude? Gentlemen, blocking is not a message to her. It is a lock on your own liquor cabinet, and anyway, she is not standing at your profile, wondering why the door's closed. She's at the farmer's market. That's the whole point. Photos archived to the same drive. Phone gallery scrubbed. Memory notifications off. And here's one from the trenches nobody tells you. The algorithm does not respect your grief. Instagram will suggest her cousin. Spotify will ambush you with your song on a random Tuesday. The cloud will make her a slideshow with piano music for your anniversary. I'm serious, it did that. And you can't block it all, so when the machine ambushes you, use the wave protocol from last chapter, name it, write it, 4 minutes, stand up. And the voicemail. I want to be honest about the voicemail. I kept it for another 2 months, my last bottle in the house. And one Saturday in September, sober, daylight, after a good workout, I listened to it one final time, sitting on my tailgate, and I let the wave come, and then I deleted it, and I sat there for a while, and nothing collapsed. The world stayed up. That delete was the first thing that felt less like loss and more like discharge papers. Now, the real world, 'cause I can hear 2 objections, and they're both legitimate, and both have answers. First, the man who shares a child with her, which was me. No contact purist doctrine is for 20-somethings. I had a daughter to co-parent. Here's what I learned, and family therapists have a name for it. You go from partners to colleagues. The channel stays open, and the channel gets a dress code. Logistics only. Brief, polite, boring, an email tone even in texts, pickup times, fevers, permission slips, and nothing else travels on it. No how are you really, no nostalgia after Maya's asleep, no arguing old cases and when Lauren would drift warm on that channel, and she did. Guilt makes levers chatty. Month 7, she's texting me a meme about something, our old kind of joke. I did not match the warmth. I answered the logistics and let the rest fall, and it felt cold, and it was correct. Because that warmth wasn't a door, it was her managing her own feelings at the expense of mine, using the man on the stretcher as emotional service. Colleagues. Boring, reliable, bulletproof colleagues. It protects you, and here's the part that got me to actually comply. It protects the kid, because every therapist will tell you the single biggest predictor of how children survive divorce is the temperature between the adults, and boring is the best temperature there is. Second objection, the friends offer, because she will offer, they nearly always offer. I don't want to lose you completely. You're still my best friend, can't we at least? And some of you are holding that offer right now like it's the last piece of her, and I'm going to be the friend who tells you what it is. It is a demotion delivered as a compliment, and accepting it puts you on the payroll of her comfort for free. She gets continuity. The familiar confidant. Proof she's a good person who stays friends with exes. A soft landing for her guilt. You get a front row seat to her new life, with a lanyard that says harmless. And you will take the job, hoping it's a foot in the door, which means every coffee is surveillance, every laugh is an audition. You're not her friend, you're an undercover applicant for your old position which has been filled. I took the job for exactly 3 weeks, 1 coffee, 1 gutting hour hearing about her new apartment with a smile nailed to my face, and I resigned by text that night, and I'll give you the resignation language free of charge, because it's the most dignified paragraph I produced that whole year. I said, I can't do friends, not because I hate you, because I don't, but because it keeps me at a funeral that everyone else has left. When I'm actually over this, years, probably, maybe we'll know each other again. Until then, I'll be at pickup on Thursdays. She wrote back, "I understand." And you know what? She did. And her respect for me went up a visible notch that day. And hear me clearly, that's not why you do it. Chasing her respect is just to play again. But it tells you what strength actually reads like from the other side. The friend's offer refused, kindly, firmly, is often the first strong thing she's watched you do in years. 90 days of that protocol, real ones, and the shakes were noticeably further apart. Not gone. But the 3 a.m. reaches stopped finding a phone, because the phone slept in the kitchen now, and slowly the artery closed, and with the bleeding controlled, something unexpected happened that I have to warn you about, because it ambushed me. The silence I'd finally built, the genuinely empty evenings, no shrine to visit, no thread to excavate, that silence filled up with something worse than her for a while. Me. Alone in an apartment with the one person I'd been avoiding harder than her photos. And somewhere in that silence, month 6, sleepless, I typed 4 words into a search engine that half the men listening have typed, and fell down a hole that took months to climb out of. A hole full of men who were angrier than me, more articulate than me, and absolutely certain they'd decoded women, love, and everything that had happened to me. Some of what they told me was rope. Some of it was poison in a rope costume. Next chapter, the red pill. At 3 a.m., the honest autopsy. What saved me. What nearly finished the job the arithmetic started. Chapter 7. The red pill at 3 a.m. The search was, why do women leave good men? Month 6. 1 a.m. Apartment silent. Phone newly boring because I'd cleaned her out of it. And the internet did what the internet does. It looked at a bleeding man and showed him where the sharks feed. Within an hour I was in the forums. Within a week I was 6 videos deep every night into men with podcast microphones, explaining, with total confidence, exactly what had happened to me. Within a month I could speak the whole dialect, hypergamy, branch swinging, alpha widow, the wall, Briffelt's law, men marry hoping she'll never change, and women marry planning to change him, the manosphere, the red pill, whatever name you met it under. I lived there for about 4 months, and I want to do something with this chapter that I've never heard anyone do calmly, which is an honest autopsy. Not a takedown. The takedowns are written by people who've never been on this floor at 1 a.m., and not a recruitment either, because some of what's in that pool nearly finished what the arithmetic started. I'm going to sort it the way D sorts a scene. What's medicine here? What's poison? And how do you tell? Because you, my listener, a hurting man with a phone, you will end up in that water. The algorithm will see to it, and nobody's giving men a field guide. First, the medicine, and I'm going to be square with you. Some of it is real medicine, and pretending otherwise is why heartbroken men don't trust the polite advice. The first night I read a stranger describe the begging weeks, my begging weeks, the texts, the grand gesture, the letter, described them from pattern recognition because he'd watched 10,000 men do it, and then predict, in order, what she'd say, "You're making this harder. If you love me, stop." I felt the specific relief of a man in an emergency finally meeting someone who's seen this before. The polite world had given me "she'll come around and everything happens for a reason." These men gave me "she is not coming back. Stop degrading yourself. No one is coming to save you. Close the artery. Lift weights. Build yourself into someone you respect." Gentlemen, that is triage. Crude triage. But I've watched it hold men together, and it held me together for a season, and here's the rest of what I'd stamp as real. That begging repels. We've covered the physics. They're right. That she detached long before she told me, right? I just gave you 2 chapters on it. that the exits usually have a branch waiting, right? More often than the polite world will ever admit. That the friend's offer is a demotion, right? That women desire strength standards and a man with his own gravity, and that comfort blob agreeableness kills attraction dead over a decade, right? And it cost me a marriage to learn it, and there's a whole chapter ahead where I take that medicine all the way down. That your body, your money, your mission are trainable, and that a man rebuilding those has better odds in every future room he walks into, right? Obviously, right? Half this book's back nine is that. And one more, the one the polite world calls cynical, and I call Tuesday, that a lot of what got labeled my depression lifted when I fixed my sleep, my body, and my purpose, because male despair is often situational, not chemical, and the situation can be renovated. They were the first people I heard say that plainly, so why am I not one of them? Because I watched what the water does to men who stay in it, and I felt it start to do it to me. Here's the poison and how it works. Because it's clever, it never arrives as poison, it arrives as more medicine. The mechanism is this. Every true observation in that pool gets extended past its evidence until it curdles into a law of nature. Watch it happen. Start with something true. Some women leave the way Lauren left, detached inside the marriage, branch secured, timeline hidden. True, documented, I lived it. Now extend, all women are like that. All Walt, they stamp it. Every woman will do this to you the moment a taller branch appears. Love is a female fiction. She was never capable of loving you. None of them are. It's all resource extraction with perfume on it. And a man, 6 months into the worst pain of his life, reads that and feels, and I need you to understand this, feels it as relief. That's the hook. If all women are like that, then nothing was your fault, nothing was fixable. There's nothing to grieve because the love was never real, and there's nothing to examine in yourself because outcomes were predetermined by biology. The poison sells itself as painkiller, and it works. Bitterness genuinely does not hurt the way grief hurts. And this is where I have to tell you what the water was doing to me, because month 3 in it, a checker at the grocery store, sweet woman, 60 years old, said, "Have a good one, hon." And I remember the actual thought that crossed my mind, some sour little decoded thing about what women say versus what they mean, about a grandmother wishing me a good day, over cereal. I caught it, that time. The men who marinate long enough stop catching it. I watched guys in those forums arrive bleeding, get genuinely triaged, get stronger, and then never leave. 5 years in, 10, lifting, earning, quoting, and if you read closely, still checking her page, still narrating their whole architecture around a woman from 2016. And one night, it landed on me with a cold weight. Bitterness is not the opposite of the begging. It's the begging inverted. The beggar organizes his life around getting her back. The bitter man organizes his life around what she did. Same organizing principle, same tenant in the skull, same rent paid daily, and neither man is free. And the forum was full of men who had mistaken the second prison for graduation. And the last thing about the water before I tell you how I got out. Follow the money. Nothing radicalizes a man like pain plus a paywall. And there is an entire economy of microphones that need you angry. Because angry men click, subscribe, and buy the course, the coaching, the retreat. Grief has an end. That's terrible for retention. Grievance is a subscription. When a man's income depends on your rage renewing monthly, he is not your medic, he's your dealer, and you can run the test on any voice in that whole world in 10 seconds. Ask, does this man's advice, followed for 5 years, produce someone I'd want at my kitchen table? Some pass, truly. Most of the loud ones you already know. I got out because of Gus and the way Gus does things. Sideways, one sentence. I was in the station kitchen, holding forth, month 4 of the marinade, confident, fluent, explaining hypergamy to a 25-year-old EMT who had asked me literally nothing, and Gus listened from the doorway with his coffee, and when the kid escaped, Gus said quietly, for a man who's done with her, she sure writes all your material, and walked out. And I stood there with my mouth open, because, inventory, gentlemen, run the inventory I ran right there against the counter. Every book on my nightstand, about her, by proxy. Every video in my feed, her. Every conversation I'd started in 3 weeks, her, wearing a theory for a dress. I had 8 tabs open about female nature and not one about my nature. And my nature was the only variable I'd be taking into the next 40 years. She wrote all my material. 6 words. That was the day I put the red pill down. And I want to be precise about what I kept. Because throwing it all away is the polite world's mistake, and it's just as wrong. I kept the triage. I kept the market truths, that attraction has physics, that strength and standards and a built life matter, that begging repels, that exits have branches, that no one is coming. I keep them to this day. They're load-bearing in the second half of this book. What I put down was the theology, the all women, the never love, the transaction all the way down, the forever war framing where every future woman is a pre-convicted suspect and intimacy is a security breach. Because here's the actual bottom of it, the sentence I'd offer any man treading that water right now. The red pill is a decent ambulance and a terrible address. Let it stop your bleeding, let it carry you out of the wreck, and then get out of the vehicle. Because the men who move in, who bolt the theology on permanent, they don't escape the wreck, they just drive it forever. Sirens on, round and round the block where she left them. And getting out of the vehicle meant facing the thing the theology had so conveniently excused me from. Because if it's not all women, if the laws of nature didn't predetermine my file, then the file needs a different explanation, and my file, let me finally read it to you plainly, was this. Jess at 22. Renee at 23. 3 dates, vanished. A dozen first dates across my early 20s that never became second dates. Beth at 24, month 5, the speech. 2 more I'll introduce properly. Then Lauren, the only one who ever stayed, and even she, eventually, wrote the same conclusion in longer form. 6 women, 16 years, 1 driver. A Walt was a lie, but its opposite, just bad luck, brother, was a lie too, and with both lies dead, I was finally standing where the real work starts, in front of the only common denominator in the whole file. Next chapter, I pull the maintenance records on myself, all of them, the first dates that died on the vine, the month 5 massacres, the pattern under the pattern, and I warn you now, it's the chapter I'd skip if I were a coward. And the one that changed my life. Chapter 8. Every woman left the same way. Dr. Okafor gave me homework in the fall of that first year, and it's the single assignment I now hand every heartbroken man who asks me for the shortcut, because it is the shortcut, it's just that the shortcut runs through a minefield. She said, write down every one, all the way back, every woman who mattered, everyone who left, and, this is the part that stung, everyone who never even started. First dates that went nowhere. Write what happened, what you did, what they said at the end. Not what they did, what you did. And bring it in. It took me 3 weeks to do an assignment. That should take an evening. Because every entry cost me something, and I'm going to read you the file now. Condensed, names changed, humiliations intact. Because I promised you in the preface that Lauren was the 6th, and it's time you met the other 5. and the graveyard of dates that never became anybody at all. Start with the graveyard, actually, because chronologically that's where the pattern shows first, in my early 20s, in a 4-year blizzard of first dates that died on the vine. I was not a man who couldn't get dates. I want to be clear about that, because this isn't that story. I was presentable, employed, funny enough, in low-stakes rooms. I could get the first date. I could not, to save my life, get the second. And the file, once I wrote it all down, showed me a man running the same play on a loop and calling each failure a mystery. There was the coffee date. I was 23, where I brought the woman a gift. A gift. First coffee, 40 minutes into knowing her, I produced a wrapped book, because she'd mentioned an author in our 2 phone calls. And I will never forget her face, gentlemen, because I misread it for years. I filed it as touched. It was alarmed. A stranger who has studied you is not romantic, he's a liability. And the wrapped book said, "In one object I have already assigned you a role in my life that you never auditioned for. No second date." There was the dinner date at 24, the one I thought went perfectly, where she said afterward, and I quote from the file, "You're so easy to talk to, you agreed with everything I said," and I had written that down as praise. Read it again. She was describing the absence of a person. 2 hours with a mirror, and mirrors are restful and nobody dates one. No second date. There was the hike where I asked, by her count, because she counted, out loud, at the trailhead parking lot afterward, some enormous number of variations of, "Is this okay? Are you having fun? We can turn back if you want." A man checking the customer satisfaction score every 400 yards of a first date. And she was kind about it. She said, "I kept waiting for you to just lead the hike." No second date. And a dozen more like them, and here's what the dozen had in common. Every single one, when I finally laid them side by side. I never once went on those dates to find out if I liked her. I went to find out if I could pass. The date was an exam, she was the examiner, and everything I did, the studying, the agreeing, the checking, was exam behavior, and women can feel exam behavior from across a table the way I can feel a bad scene from the curb. And what it feels like, a woman told me years later when I could finally ask the question honestly, is pressure. All that eagerness reads as a man with a hole in him, holding you like the only available plug. Nobody signs up for a second evening of being a plug. Now the ones that started anyway. Jess, college, I was 22. And Jess matters because she was the prototype, the first crash at the intersection, and because month 10 of us I'd already gone full ecosystem, my friends demoted, my weekends dissolved into her schedule, my opinions quietly converted to hers, and when she took the internship across the country that I'd spent a month telling her was a great idea, because agreeable, remember, always agreeable, she stood in a parking lot by her loaded car and said the sentence that opened this whole case file. She said, "You're going to be fine. You were like this before me, and you'll be like this after me." And I didn't even understand it as information. I filed it under girls say things when they leave. It took 16 years in a green jacket to hear it. Like what before her? Like a man with no shape of his own, waiting for a woman to pour him into a container. Renee, 23, 3 dates. And the file on Renee is short and instructive. Third date, she asked me, genuinely curious, "What do you actually want, like in life?" And I answered, and listen to this answer, I answered, honestly, mostly I just want to make somebody happy. She never returned another call. Ghosted, we'd say now. For years I told that story as evidence that women say they want nice and punish it. What Renee actually heard, I understand now, was a man announcing he had no destination and was looking for a passenger seat to drive him somewhere. She declined the chauffeur position. Smart woman. Sarah. 24 90 days, who skipped the exit speech entirely and left a note on my counter. Same diagnosis, shorter form. Beth, 24, 5 months, and Beth gets the award for bluntest exit interview in the file. She sat me down and said, "I'm exhausted. I feel like I'm dating my own reflection with anxiety. You like what I like, you want what I want, you check on my mood 9 times a day like a nurse, and I realized last week I have no idea who you are, and worse, I don't think you do either." Month 5. Remember month 5. And Carrie, 25, month 6. Gentler, same autopsy. "It's like there's no floor in you," she said, "nothing to stand on. Everything moves when I push." Month 6. You see it now, right? You saw it before I did. The first dates died of exam behavior, and the relationships that survived the exam died at month 5, and they died at month 5 because that's about how long the performance holds. That's the service life of the mask, 150 days, give or take, of curated agreement and managed impressions, and then real life starts asking for a man, a preference, a direction, a no, a floor that doesn't move, and there's nothing behind the curtain but a nervous helpfulness frantically reading the room, and the woman doesn't even always know what's wrong, she just knows she's tired in a way she can't name, Beth could name it, and she starts carrying the relationship like a solo backpacker carrying tandem gear, and then she sets it down. Every woman left the same way because every woman arrived at the same discovery. There was nobody home. The address was staged. And Lauren, here's the entry that reorganized everything, the one I had to put the pen down after. Lauren didn't contradict the pattern. Lauren was the exception that proved it, because, and I'd never once done this math, Lauren met a different man. The year I met her was the 1 year of my life I'd accidentally done everything this book's back half prescribes. I was 26, fresh out of paramedic school, obsessed with the work, first man in my family to have a calling instead of a job. I was running trails at dawn because a captain told me the job demanded it. I had a crew, a direction, a schedule that made me scarce. And I barely had time for the first dates I kept failing. And into that season walked Lauren. And gentlemen, I did not run the exam on her. I didn't have time to. She used to tell people, in the good years, the story of how we met. And the detail she always included, was, he was 20 minutes late to our first date because of a call. And he walked in still a little bit somewhere else, and I remember thinking, who is this guy? Who is this guy? A man mid-mission, edges intact, gravity of his own, that's who she married. And then, year by year, comfort by comfort, concession by concession, the mission became a job, the trails became a couch, the crew became her friends, husbands, the edges got sanded by 10,000 tiny agreeable Tuesdays, and the man who was somewhere else slowly became a man who was nowhere else, nowhere at all, but orbiting her, checking her weather, is this okay, are we okay, the hike guy, the mirror, the plug, and somewhere in year 9 or 10, Lauren looked across a kitchen and made the same discovery Beth made at month 5. It just took her longer because she'd seen the real thing once and kept waiting for it to come back. My marriage didn't die of a different disease than my dating life, friend. It died of the same disease, with better insurance. 6 women, 16 years, 1 driver, and the driver wasn't unlovable. That's the part. One need you to get right in your own file, because self-hatred is just the exam again with a crueler grader. The driver was missing. I had spent my whole romantic life offering women a vacancy and grieving like a widower every time they declined to move in. So do the assignment. Tonight, this week, all the way back. Every name, every no second date, what you did, what they said at the end, and lay them side by side and look for your month 5, your wrapped book, your parking lot sentence, because your pattern won't be mine. Maybe you're the flame out, the jealous one, the fixer, the ghost. I don't know your file, but I know you have one. Everybody's got one. And I know the red pill will tell you the file is about them, and the greeting cards will tell you there is no file, and they're both lying, and the file is the way out. Because here's what changes when you finally read yours. The question stops being the drowning man's question, why does this keep happening to me? And becomes an engineer's question, what does this machine keep doing? And machines, brother, machines can be rebuilt, and the rebuild is the entire second half of this book. But before the rebuild, one more piece of demolition, the hardest one. The file explains the pattern. It doesn't yet explain the marriage, not fully, not the specific way 12 years with a good woman went quiet and then dark, and what she was actually missing all those years while I was busy being easy to live with. I owe her that chapter, and I owe you the tools in it. That's next. Chapter 9. What she was actually missing. There's a conversation from year 11 of my marriage that I didn't understand until year 2 of my divorce, and I want to start here because it's the whole chapter in miniature. We were driving back from her cousin's wedding, hour and a half of dark highway. And Lauren was quiet in the way that has weight in it, and somewhere past the county line she said, not angry, almost to the window, do you ever want anything? And I laughed, because I thought it was the opening of a nice conversation, and I said something like, I've got everything I want right here. And she didn't say anything back. And the silence that followed lasted, I realize now, about the rest of our marriage. I filed the exchange under sweet moment, husband passes test. She had asked me a diagnostic question, maybe the diagnostic question, the same one Renee asked me at 25, what do you actually want? And I had answered, for the second time in my life, with a vacancy notice. Nothing, sweetheart, nothing but proximity to you. And this time, the woman receiving that answer couldn't just not return a call. She was 11 years and one child deep in the man with no destination, and I think that highway silence was the sound of her finally pricing what that was going to cost her. This chapter is the autopsy of those years, my half of the operating table, and I have to set the rules before I make the first cut, because this is where heartbroken men fall into one of two open graves. Grave 1, it was all my fault, the self-flagellation grave, where you inventory your failures until her exit becomes justice and your worth becomes zero. We're not doing that. That's just the exam again with a crueler grader, I told you. Grave 2, I take no blame. She's broken. Next topic, the grave with the red pill flag planted on it, and we're not doing that either because I've read that file and the common denominator problem doesn't go away because you're angry at it. The honest position, the one that took me 2 years and cost real pain to hold, is two things true at once. True thing 1, I hollowed out my side of that marriage, year by year, in ways I'm about to lay open, and any man who wants the rebuild has to be able to say his version of this out loud. True thing 2, she owned her exit, the detachment run in secret, the overlap with Todd, the years of silence instead of a flare. That ledger is hers, and my work on my side does not retroactively excuse her side. Accountability is not a seesaw, gentlemen. His and hers can both be full weight at the same time. Hold both, or you'll learn nothing. So, what was she actually missing all those years? In a house with a faithful, employed, gentle man who never yelled, never strayed, never gambled, and told everyone, honestly, that his family was his whole world, because that man, on paper, is the catch, and the greeting card world will spend your whole divorce telling you she lost the best thing she ever had, and if you settle into that anesthetic, you will repeat all of it with the next woman. Here's what the man on paper looked like from her side of the bed. She was missing a first-person man, That's the biggest cut, so I'll make it first. Somewhere around year 3 or 4, I stopped being the subject of my own sentences. Listen for this. In your own house, it's audible once you know it. What do I want for dinner became whatever you feel like. Where should we go this summer? Wherever's easiest for you and Maya. What do you think about the school thing, the job thing, the couch, the color? I think whatever keeps the peace. Dressed up as easygoing. 10,000 deferrals, each one microscopic, each one feeling to me like love, like service, like being low maintenance, and compounding over a decade into a man who brought nothing to the table but the table itself. Here's what I didn't understand, and if you're married right now, hear this one sentence even if you shut the book after. Every time you say whatever you want to a woman, you hand her a small invoice for a decision, and you think you're giving her freedom, and she's receiving workload. Lauren didn't want the deciding power. That's the piece the agreeable husband can't imagine. She wanted a co-author with a pen in his hand, and year by year I converted her from my partner into my manager. And nobody wants to sleep with their employee. Which brings me to the bedroom, and the sentence I overheard that I was never meant to hear, and it's brutal and it goes in the book anyway. You're 10, her sister visiting, the two of them on the porch with wine, me inside with the game on low, and through the screen door her sister asked something I didn't catch, and Lauren said, I can't explain it, he's wonderful with her, he'd do anything for me, it'd be like sleeping with a golden retriever. A golden retriever. I stood in my kitchen holding a beer I never opened and performed, within 90 seconds, the most impressive act of not hearing in human history. Never mentioned it. Never let myself think it again until Okafor's office. But there it is. The physics I've promised this whole book, stated by the coroner herself. Devotion without gravity reads as pet, not partner. She could count on me for everything except the one thing desire runs on, which is friction. Wanting. A man who exists at a slight angle to her, someone still slightly somewhere else. The guy who walked in 20 minutes late from a call all those years ago. I had traded every degree of that angle for smoothness, and smoothness, it turns out, is what you can't grip. She was missing anybody to push against. Same disease, structural view. A marriage needs load-bearing walls, 2 of them, and somewhere in there I'd quietly become drywall over nothing. Every real conflict I folded early, called it picking my battles, except audit the ledger, and I picked none, ever, and here's what a decade of instant folding taught her body, beneath argument, that my yes meant nothing, because it was the only word I had, that my judgment was unavailable, because it always arrived pre-shaped to her expected preference, and, darkest of all, that she was alone on watch. Because a woman married to a man who won't push back doesn't feel spoiled, brother. She feels unguarded, like the co-pilot found the captain asleep, and some of what looked like her controllingness in year 8, the tight grip on calendars and money and Maya's everything, I now read completely differently. She wasn't seizing power. Power kept landing on her because I kept setting it down, and she was white-knuckling a plane she never asked to fly solo. Exhausting. Best word, remember, month 5. Lauren lasted 140 months. In a strange way I've come to see it, not kindly exactly, but clearly, she carried the vacancy longer than anyone, and she was missing the man she'd actually chosen. I told you she married the medic mid-mission, the one with the crew and the dawn trail runs and somewhere to be. I need to be precise about what happened to him. He wasn't murdered by the marriage, that's the resentful man's version. She domesticated me, they trap you, then they leave you. Nobody trapped me. I traded him away myself, voluntarily, a piece at a time, and always for the same coin, comfort. Skip the trail run because the bed was warm. Let the crew scatter because organizing a Tuesday felt like effort. Passed on the instructor track. the mission's next chapter, because it meant 2 hard years, and we were comfortable. That word, that upholstered coffin of a word, we're comfortable. The most seductive lie ever told to a married man is that comfort is the finish line, that landing the family means the building of yourself is done, switch to maintenance mode, coast. And the cruelty of that trade is arithmetic. She fell for a man in motion, invested in a man in motion, and then watched the motion stop, and got handed the couch, and the agreeableness, and the golden retriever devotion as the exchange rate, and was told, by every sitcom and every well-meaning pastor, that this was maturity, this was what settling down meant, and some part of her, the part that took her body back to the gym at year 11, called the trade what it was. A bait-and-switch that neither of us had meant to run. That's the autopsy. A first-person man. Gone. A wall to push against. Gone. The man in motion she chose. Gone. And all 3 sold off by me. For comfort. In 10,000 painless daily transactions. Until the person across the spaghetti was, her word, that first honest night. Done. And the terrible mercy I can finally extend her from 8 years out is this. I no longer think she left a good man. I think she left a good man's unforwarded mail. The good man had left years earlier, without telling either of us. Why does a man do that to himself? Where does the dissolving come from? I've given you my childhood free version of this book on purpose. Other books on this channel dig the early origins and dig them well, and my file's roots are ordinary, a boy who learned early that being easy was being safe. What matters for our road is the repair, and here's the pivot I want to send you into the rebuild chapters with, because it's the sentence Okafor put on the table the day I finished the autopsy and sat there asking, so how do I make sure the next relationship doesn't? And she stopped me at doesn't. She said, you're doing it again. Even your healing is aimed at an audience. Build the man first. Not for her, not for the next her, not as bait for a better outcome. Build him because you're the one who has to live in him, and let the relationships come find the finished address. Everything from here forward, the purge, the body, the money, the mission, the daughter, is that build, in the order I actually did it. And it starts, of all places, with a Saturday, a dumpster, and 4,000 photographs. Time to burn the shrine. Chapter 10. Burn the shrine. 10 months in, my brother Danny came to visit, stood in the doorway of my apartment with a 6-pack, did a slow scan of the place, and said, it's like she died, and also still lives here. And I got defensive, and then I followed his eyes and did the scan myself, honestly, for the first time. The throw blanket on my couch, hers, chosen by her for the old house, evacuated with me like a refugee. Her mug, the blue one, in my cabinet that I did not drink from, ever, it just lived there. A little ceramic embassy of a foreign country. The wedding photo was down. I wasn't a lunatic, but it was face down in the top drawer of my dresser. Which is worse, actually. That's not storage. That's a reliquary with a sock budget. The playlist I still ran on shift drives. 40 songs. 30 of them load-bearing memories. Her shampoo brand in my shower, and I need you to sit with that one, 'cause I bought it myself. At a store, with money. A divorced man buying his ex-wife's shampoo because the bathroom smelled wrong without it. 10 months of no contact. Artery clamped. Therapy underway, file written, and I was still living inside a museum of her, sleeping in the gift shop and wondering why the waves kept finding me at home. So this chapter is about stuff and space, and it sounds like the lightweight chapter after the heavy ones, and I'm telling you it punches far above its weight, because here's the mechanism nobody explains to men. Your environment is not neutral. Every object in your field of vision is a small instruction to your nervous system. And objects from the old life all carry the same instruction: remember, remember, remember. And a man trying to detox in a room full of dosing stations isn't strong-willed. He's just running his recovery on the hardest possible setting. The brain rewires by not firing the old circuits. That's the whole boring science of it. And the mug fires the circuit. The blanket fires the circuit. The shampoo, gentlemen. The shampoo fires it 40 times a week from close range with warm water involved. You cannot think your way out of a room that keeps arguing with you. You have to clear the room. Here's how I did it, and how I'd tell you to do it, 'cause I did some of it wrong. Saturday, month 10. Not a bad day, that's the first rule. Don't purge in the crater. A man mid-wave will either chicken out or go scorched earth and torch things his future self needed. Do it on a decent day, sober, daylight, music on, something with no history. I used a podcast about submarines. God's honest truth. The most emotionally inert audio I could find. 3 boxes and a trash bag. Box 1, hers. Anything that was actually hers. The mug, the blanket, half a shelf of books. It goes back to her. No ceremony, no note that took you an hour. You hand it over at a Thursday pickup like the colleagues you now are. Here, found some of your stuff. And watch yourself for the impulse to curate that box into a message, to put something meaningful on top. That's the letter trying to happen again. It's a box, not a mixtape. Box 2, Maya's. Anything that's really about the family, the albums, the ornaments, the video drives, her 4th birthday, the beach years. That stuff is not yours to burn, brother. That's your kid's history. And here's the move that saved me from myself. Seal it, label it, and exile it. Danny's attic, in my case, out of your line of sight, but out of the reach of your worst night too, because there will be a night somewhere in the recovery, month 13 was mine, where you want to feel something on purpose, and if the archive is in arm's reach, you will spend till 4 a.m. in it like a drunken Make the archive require daylight, a drive, and a witness. And box 3, the shrine proper, the things that exist only to hurt you, the face-down photo, the anniversary cards, the dried thing from her bouquet that I had, 39 years old, and a tackle box, the shirt that still, and this is its entire function, faintly smelled. That box goes, and I know the internet wants me to say burn it, film it, the Phoenix ritual, and look, I get the theater of it, but I'll tell you what Gus told me when I mentioned a bonfire. He said, "Fire's a ceremony, son. Ceremonies are for things you're honoring." It went in the dumpster behind the station, between shifts, no music, no speech, and the anticlimax is the medicine. It's a Tuesday, it's trash, it was always just objects. The grief gets a funeral, we did that in chapter 5, the props don't. Then the deeper layer, the one I didn't see until the boxes were gone and the apartment echoed. The empty spaces where her stuff had been were still hers, if I left them empty. A cleared museum is still a museum. It's just a looted one. And a lot of men stop here in the beige echo, living in the outline of the old life, and call it minimalism. The second half of the purge is occupation. You have to move into your own life like a new tenant, and I mean physically. I repainted that apartment over 2 weekends, a color she'd have hated, this deep green. Not because she'd have hated it, okay, 10%, because she'd have hated it, I said I'd be honest, but 90% because choosing a wall color was pathetically, wonderfully, the first purely first-person aesthetic decision I'd made in a decade. The "do you ever want anything" question answered in latex paint. New sheets, new bed if you could possibly afford it, and I could not afford it and did it anyway. Because the bed is the headquarters of the whole insurgency, and you cannot win sleeping on the old flag. The playlist, rebuilt from zero, and this is where I discovered, at 39, standing in my kitchen, that I did not actually know what music I liked. Not what we liked. What I liked. It took months of embarrassing experimentation. There was a bluegrass phase. D still brings it up, and every dumb phase of it was the man reassembling. That's the real cargo of this chapter. The purge isn't about erasing her. It can't erase her. She's the mother of my kids. She's woven in. It's about ending her tenure as the curator of your daily sensory life and giving the job to the only person who was ever supposed to have it. 2 boxes I have to open before we leave this chapter, because they're the ones nobody talks about. The ring. Mine sat in the truck console for a year. In the cup holder, well, little titanium ghost riding shotgun, and I'd notice it at red lights. A man at the group Gus eventually dragged me to, we'll get there, told me what he did with his, and I did the same and hand it to you now. Sell it, it's just metal. The marriage isn't in it. And take the cash, and it won't be much titanium, gentlemen. And spend every dollar on the most first-person thing you own. Mine bought the first month of a coaching certification I'd wanted since my 20s. A guy in the group bought a kayak. The point isn't the object. The point is the conversion. Dead symbol into living fuel. The past literally purchasing the future. And the second box, the digital shrine, round 2, because we clamped her accounts in the no contact chapter, but 10 months in I found the deeper stratum, the shared calendar still auto-repeating date night every 3rd Friday, her name still my emergency contact, at the dentist of all places, the joint photo cloud still syncing, her Netflix profile sitting in my TV like a ghost at the table, 3rd row down, watching me. The digital purge takes an ugly afternoon of passwords and unsubscribes, and it is worth every minute, because these are the ambushes, the machine-scheduled griefs, and you can actually disarm them. And there's something quietly enormous about the dentist call. Hi, yeah, I need to update my emergency contact. It's my brother now, that sentence. Said flatly to a receptionist who could not care less, did more for me than some whole therapy sessions. The paperwork of a life is where the old world actually ends, form by form, and every form is a representative. By month 12, the apartment was mine. Green walls, terrible bluegrass, new sheets, a kid's room half-painted the yellow Maya picked, and a body that was starting slowly to change because the purge had freed up something I hadn't expected. Bandwidth, all those background remember circuits gone quiet, and I took every recovered watt and carried it to the one place that pays compound interest to a broken man, the place this whole recovery turned the corner. A garage gym at 5:40 in the morning with Gus and a bar, and 45 years of other men's grief chalked into the knurling. The body rebuild. That's next, and I'll tell you now, it's not a fitness chapter. It's the chapter about getting your nervous system back on your side. Chapter 11. The Body Rebuild. Gus lifted at 5:40 in the morning in his garage, 3 days a week, had for 30 years, with a rotating cast of broken firefighters and medics, and one retired judge, and the price of admission was that you showed up. And the culture of the place was that nobody asked why you'd started coming. Everybody knew why a man starts showing up at a garage gym at 5:40. I started in November, month 10, the week after the dumpster, because Gus didn't invite me so much as inform me, and I want to put the first morning on the record. 40 pounds on the bar for a man who'd carried stretchers for 2 decades, hands shaking on the knurling, gassed in 20 minutes, and at the end of it, Gus wrote my numbers in chalk on the black wall with everybody else's, tiny numbers, humiliating numbers, and I said something self-deprecating, and Gus said, without turning around, "Nobody in this garage cares where you start, son." The wall only tracks one thing, and it's not where you start. This is not a fitness chapter. I need to say that twice, because men in the blast radius have been sold the montage 100 times, get shredded, make her regret it, revenge body, and that pitch is just the shrine again, another project with her as the audience, and it collapses the day you realize she isn't watching. This chapter is about something underneath fitness. It's about the fact that after a year of grief, my nervous system and I were no longer on the same side. My own body had become a hostile roommate, feeding me 3 A.M. cortisol, refusing food, flinching at songs, and the barbell, it turns out, is the most direct negotiation channel that roommate respects. So here's the actual case for iron, made to heartbroken men minus the montage. First, it's the only place I found where the pain converts. Everywhere else in a broken man's day, pain is just pain, static, weather, attacks. Under a bar, for 1 hour, pain has a purpose and a denomination. 5 more pounds, 1 more rep, and something in the deep hardware recognizes the trade and accepts it. I've had men in the group describe the same thing. The hour under load was the only hour the noise stopped, and there's real physiology under that, the hormones of effort scrubbing the hormones of grief, but the part that mattered to me was simpler. 3 mornings a week, I kept a promise to myself at an hour when nobody was watching, and no one could be impressed. Remember the diagnosis, a man who dissolved because every action was aimed at an audience. The 540 garage was the first arena of my adult life, with no audience at all, chalk numbers nobody outside that room would ever see, and every session was a brick in an answer to Okafor's question, "Who is this for?" It was for me. First things in decades that were. Second, the compounding is real, and it leaks into everything. And I want to give you the honest timeline instead of the montage timeline, because the montage lies about the calendar, and the lie discourages men at week 6. Weeks 1 through 6, nothing visible, everything hurts, sleep improves. Almost immediately, though, hold on to that, sleep is the first dividend, and it pays before anything shows in a mirror. Months 2 through 6, strength moves first. The chalk numbers doubled before my shirts knew anything had happened. Appetite came back, and I had to relearn eating like an adult with intent. Protein, groceries, actual cooking, a divorced man's kitchen going from bourbon and cereal to something a paramedic would sign off on. And that, quietly, was its own recovered country. Cooking for one without it being sad. That's a skill, gentlemen. It can be learned. Months 6 through 18, the body actually changed. 45 pounds recomposed across that window. And the number matters less than the 2 moments I keep. Moment 1, month 9 or so. A kid at a car wreck. I lifted the door piece they needed lifting, the kind of thing you call 2 guys for, and I just lifted it and drove home after the shift feeling something ancient and specific, useful in my own skin. And moment 2, month 15, a woman from Lauren's old circle walked past me at a coffee place, made eye contact, no recognition, none, kept walking, then stopped and turned and said my name like a question, and I watched the recalculation run behind her eyes, and I'd be lying, I promised you honest. I'd be lying if I said that didn't land somewhere delicious. It did. Just, and here's the discipline, I let it land and I let it leave. If that moment becomes the fuel, you're back on the audience treadmill. It's a dividend, not the investment. Third, the sun and the boring stack. Because the bar gets the chapter title, but the boring stack does half the work, and no one sells it, because there's nothing to sell. Sleep, guarded like a job. Same window every night. Phone in the kitchen, we covered why. Morning light, 10 minutes, outside, every day, and I know how it sounds. I rolled my eyes for 40 years, and then I spent a winter walking at dawn because a therapist assigned it, and I'm telling you, it moves the needle on the 3 a.m. cortisol like a medication. Long, slow runs back in the rotation, the trail runs from the year Lauren met me, resurrected, and I noticed which year of me I was resurrecting. Thank you. Alcohol, demoted back from anesthesia to beverage, and for 8 months to nothing, because I didn't trust myself with the keys yet, and that honesty with self is a muscle too. And the doctor, the actual doctor, because I want one straight paragraph for the over 35 men. I got blood work at month 11, first physical in 6 years, and my testosterone had been scraped along the bottom of the range. And before anyone reaches for a prescription, hear the sequence. A year later, after the sleep, the bar, the weight, the sunlight, the drop bourbon, retested, mid-400s to over 700, no pharmacy involved. I'm not saying medicine's never the answer, some men need it, talk to somebody qualified. I'm saying grief life, the bourbon, the fetal position sleep, the beige apartment twilight. Grief life is biochemically identical to the protocol you designed to hollow a man out, and most of the hollowing reverses with embarrassingly old-fashioned inputs, and a man mid-recovery deserves to know that before he decides what's chemical destiny and what's just the crater. Last thing, and then the money, because there's a version of this chapter that goes wrong too, and I watched a guy from the group live it. The body can become the next shrine. Same mechanism, different altar, 3 hours a day, 6 days a week. Food weighed to the gram. Mirrors studied like scripture, and underneath it the same old sentence running, if I just become impressive enough, someone will finally, and you know the rest. It's the wrapped book again. It's exam behavior with a pump. The tell is the audience check. If you catch yourself building the body at her, or at the internet, or at the entire gender, if the progress photo's imaginary recipient has a face, ease off and reread Chapter 9. The garage was medicine for me precisely because it had no audience, and the wall only tracked one thing. Show up, move the chalk, go live. The body is the platform, gentlemen, not the point. Nobody rebuilds a chassis just to park it in the garage and wax it. You rebuild it because you've got somewhere to be. Which raises the actual question, the one the barbell can't answer, the one Renee asked, the one Lauren asked the window on that dark highway. Somewhere like where? A man needs a mission, and a man needs his money unbroken. And at month 14, I had neither. I had a strong back, a green apartment, and a lawyer's bill I couldn't look at directly, and a shelved dream with 15 years of dust on it. Both of those get fixed in the same chapter. Next. Chapter 12. Money and a Mission. Let's do the money first, because it's the part of divorce nobody above ground wants to discuss honestly, and the silence costs men double. I'm going to give you my numbers in shapes rather than dollars, partly for privacy, mostly because the shapes are what transfer. The divorce itself, lawyers on both sides, mediation, filings, the whole administrative demolition of a 12-year life, cost about a year of my take-home pay. The settlement, she kept the house equity, I kept my pension and retirement accounts. We split the rest down lines that felt in the room like losing an arm to keep a leg, and child support runs monthly, calculated off a formula that does not care even slightly how you feel about it. Add the second household a divorced father has to stand up from zero, deposit, furniture, the bunk bed, double toothbrushes, and the honest total is this shape. The year of the divorce, I went backward financially by roughly everything I'd saved in the previous 6 at 39 years old, while performing my job at 60% capacity and paying a therapist weekly. That's the real invoice, and I itemize it not to frighten you, but because the men's forums where I swam that year use these exact numbers as the case for the whole bitter theology, the courts are a scam, marriage is a trap with a formula attached, she takes half your soul, and then the state takes half your check. And I promised you the honest sort, medicine from poison, so here it is. What's real? The process is adversarial by design, and it monetizes conflict. Every angry email routed through counsel costs what a nice dinner costs. Every contested hearing costs a vacation. And nobody in the building is paid more when you two calm down. Family court carries history, and a father who walks in assuming the custody default tilts against him is not paranoid. He's read the same statistics I have. And the asymmetry that radicalized me for a season is real too. I did the leaving spouse math one bourbonless night. The Walkaway Timeline means she planned in comfort while I reacted in shock. And shock makes expensive decisions. All true. Now what I did with it versus what the forums prescribe. The forums prescribe rage, and rage in this arena is the single most expensive substance known to man. Gus's Rule 3, remember, no major decisions in the acute phase, has a courtroom corollary he also gave me, and it saved me 5 figures minimum, and possibly my custody schedule. He said, the system doesn't reward the wronged son, it rewards the reasonable. Your only job for the next year is to be the most boring, documented, cooperative, on-time man that courthouse has ever processed. So I was. I answered every filing on time, kept a log, a plain dated log of every pickup, every payment, every interaction, not as a weapon, as a seatbelt, agreed to everything fair without theater, contested the 2 things that actually mattered, and only those, and when Lauren's attorney floated the standard every other weekend father schedule, I did not do the wounded man courtroom speech I'd rehearsed in the shower. I produced a 2-year record of my shifts, a written parenting plan matched to them, a letter from my captain about schedule accommodation, and a calm sentence I'd practiced until it had no burrs on it. I'm not here to win against her. I'm here to stay Maya's father at full strength. I got my 50-50. Not because the system is fair, I make no such claim. Because in an arena rigged to reward the reasonable, the man who weaponizes boring wins everything that was still winnable. That's the red pill money chapter they don't sell, gentlemen, because rage retains subscribers and boring doesn't. Be boring. Boring is free and it compounds. And then the rebuild. Because surviving the demolition is defense, and a man can't live in defense. 2 years of small, ugly discipline, the budget app, the extra shifts, packed lunches while my peers bought boats, and the strange dignity that crept in through it. Because here's what I noticed around month 20. Handling money honestly turned out to run on the same muscle as everything else in this book. Deciding on purpose. First-person finance. The broke version of me and the agreeable version of me were the same man, both of them drifting on whatever you think, both allergic to the small no. The budget was just boundaries with arithmetic, and every month it balanced, something in me consolidated that had nothing to do with dollars. Which brings me to the mission, and the file folder in my desk drawer. I told you Lauren met a man mid-mission, and that the mission had quietly become a job somewhere in the comfortable years. Here's the specific shape of that. Since about year 5 on the trucks, I had wanted to teach. Not as a hobby, as the thing, the next mountain, there's a whole track for it, instructor certifications, a state-level program, eventually the kind of role where you build the training pipeline for a county, and I'd assembled the application folder twice in my 30s. Twice. And both times it stayed in the drawer, and if you asked me then, I'd have given you the family excuse. Can't do the coursework with a little kid, can't take the pay dip while we're saving for the house, and some of that was true the way furniture is true, but the load-bearing reason, the one the autopsy found, was that the mission required me to be temporarily bad at something in public, to be a 40-year-old student, to risk failing an exam other medics would hear about, and the approval-dependent man cannot budget for public risk. So the folder aged in the drawer for a decade while I told everyone my family was my whole world. And we know now what that sentence was hiding, don't we? A world with one load-bearing wall, her, and when she left, no mission caught me, because I'd filed the mission under someday, and someday, it turns out, was scheduled for never. Month 16, I pulled the folder, and I want to walk you through the actual mechanics of resurrection, because motivation had nothing to do with it. Month 16, me had no surplus motivation, and the montage lies about this too. What I had was a therapist's homework. Name one thing you shelved that was yours. An hour of unscheduled Tuesday. And the ring money, remember the ring money, sitting in an envelope, pre-committed to first-person purposes, which meant the enrollment fee was already spent in my head. The past had already paid for it. So I enrolled before I felt ready. That's the whole mechanic. The feeling follows the enrollment by about 6 weeks, never precedes it, and I did the coursework at the station between calls. Took the practical exam at 40 alongside kids D's son's age. Passed the written by 2 points, 2 points. Framed the ugly score sheet. It hangs in my office right now next to the chalk wall photo. And started teaching a Tuesday night EMT basic section at the community college. And I drove home from that first class the way I used to drive home from dates that went well, wired, replaying, already drafting improvements. And that's the thing about a mission nobody can hand you, and no barbell supplies. It's not a distraction from the void. It's the only thing that actually competes with the old obsession on its own terms, an open loop, a thing that's alive and needs you tomorrow. The brain circles whatever's unfinished. That's its nature. We established it circling her for a year. You don't stop the circling, gentlemen. You give it a better unfinished thing. Do I have to say it? The mission cannot be aimed at her either. There's a version of this chapter where the certification is the bench again, look what I built since you left, and the tell is the same audience check as the gym. Mine passed the check for one reason I could verify. The folder predated her. Whatever was in your drawer before the woman, or beneath the marriage, or shelved in the comfortable years, that's where the mission usually lives, not in some invented reinvention, in the resurrection of a thing that was always first person and got traded for smoothness. Pull the folder, enroll before you're ready, be publicly bad at it at 40. The class doesn't care about your divorce, and there's more mercy in that sentence than in every sympathy card I received that year. By month 20, then, the ledger read like this. Body, coming back. Money, hemorrhage stopped, rebuild begun. Mission, alive, Tuesday nights, folding chairs. Weather inside, survivable most days. And one entire continent of my life I've made you wait for, deliberately, because the internet's version of this book skips it, and I think the skipping is a scandal. The whole time, through every chapter you've heard, there was a small person with her mother's eyes watching all of it from a bunk bed on my Thursdays, learning what happens to love when it breaks, taking her notes on what a man does when his life explodes. Everything in this book, the floor, the begging, the rebuild, all of it happened in front of a witness 4 feet tall, and the chapter about her is the one I'd keep if I had to burn the rest. Maya. Next. Chapter 13. Maya. We told her together at the old house on a Saturday morning her mother chose because the book Lauren had bought, and of course Lauren had already bought the book, said mornings were better, kids have the whole day to process. Maya was 6.5. She sat on the couch between us, and we did it the way the book said. Short sentences, both parents calm, it's not your fault, everybody loves you, mommy and daddy are going to live in different houses. And Maya listened with her whole small face, and then she asked her first question. And I want it on the record because it taught me everything about how children actually process the end of a world. She asked, who's going to take care of the fish? The fish. We had a beta named Steve. And I almost laughed, and I almost broke in half at the same time. And I've since learned from people who do this professionally that this is exactly it. This is the whole child's eye view. They cannot hold the collapsing architecture, so they grab one load-bearing detail and check it. Is the structure of my care intact? Will someone feed what needs feeding? And the answer we gave mattered less than the fact that we had one ready. Steve goes with Daddy. You'll see him Thursdays and every other weekend. And she nodded and asked if she could go play. And the book said that was normal too. And she went and played. And Lauren and I sat on that couch, 2 feet and a dead marriage apart, listening to our daughter narrate a game in the next room. And that was the last time the three of us were a household. Now let me tell you about being a Thursday father, because the schedule says 50-50 eventually. I fought for that and got it. But the first year was Thursdays and alternating weekends in a 2-bedroom apartment with a bunk bed she'd picked out. And here is the part no one prepared me for. It wasn't the missing her. I'd braced for the missing her. It was the drop-offs. Sunday evenings, returning her to the old house, my old house, walking her to a door I used to have keys to, and the first month she'd cry at that door, not tantrum crying, worse, quiet leaking crying, holding my leg, and I would do the strong dad routine, kneel down, big hug, see you Thursday, love bug, and then walk to my truck like a man with somewhere to be, and sit in it at the end of the block and come apart like wet cardboard. Month 4 of that, I nearly gave the crying a different answer. There was a night she wailed at the door, really wailed, "Daddy, don't go." And every cell in me wanted to turn to Lauren and say, "Whatever you want, I'll take whatever deal makes this stop, and I need to hand this to the men in that exact moment, because some of you are there." The crying at the door is not evidence the arrangement is destroying her. It's evidence that transitions are hard for small humans, all transitions. The same kid cried like that at preschool drop-off in the before times. Remember that. I had to be reminded of it by Okafor, professionally, with a graph practically. Kids grieve in bursts at thresholds and then go inside and eat dinner and are okay. And the parent who collapses the whole custody architecture to stop the threshold tears teaches the kid that doors are catastrophes and buys his own guilt down at the price of her stability. Hold the routine. The routine is the medicine. By month 8, the door was a high 5. I promise you the door becomes a high 5. Here's what I actually had to learn. The real curriculum of divorced fatherhood. And it's 3 things, and none of them are in the custody agreement. First, she was watching the rebuild. All of it. I thought I was protecting her from my collapse, and I was, from the visible parts. No bourbon on my Thursdays ever, no crying where she could see. The arithmetic, never within a mile of her. But children read parents the way I read a scene, vitals first, words never. And she knew her father was hurt the way she knew weather. So the question was, never will she find out. The question was, what will she watch him do about it? And this reframe, which was Gus's, of course it was Gus's, took my recovery and gave it a second engine. He said, she's taking notes, right? Whatever you do with this is her manual for what a person does when life breaks. When I started at the garage gym, I told her, Daddy's getting strong in the mornings, and she'd ask for updates and flex her small arm at me at pickup. When I was studying for the instructor exam at the kitchen table on my weekends, she did her homework across from me, the two of us with our books, and when I passed by 2 ugly points, she made me a card. It said #1 student, misspelled, best card I ever got. It's framed next to the score sheet. My daughter watched a man hit the floor and build a person from the wreckage at close range over 3 years, and I did not choose for her to see the fall, but I got to choose every frame of what she saw after. And gentlemen, that is the meaning the manosphere kept telling me my pain didn't have. Your kids aren't watching your marriage anymore. They're watching your response. It's the one audience you're allowed. Second, never fight the war through her, and I mean the small stuff. Everyone knows not to do the big stuff, the bad-mouthing, the interrogations about mommy's friend. I mean the microscopic stuff that leaks out of a bitter man like radiation. The tone when her mother's name comes up. The eyebrow at Todd has a truck with a ladder rack. The tiny pause before saying, "That's great, honey," about a fun weekend at the other house. Kids are dosimeters. They register every Roentgen. And here's the mechanism that finally made me clean it up completely. A child is half of each of you and knows it, so every ounce of contempt that reaches her about her mother arrives in her arithmetic as contempt for half of herself. You cannot poison the well she drinks from and call it your own private bitterness. So Lauren got from me in front of Maya for 11 years and counting, professional grade respect. And it was an act for the first 2, I'll be honest, colleagues. Remember, boring bulletproof colleagues. And here's the thing about that act. The thing about most of the acts in this book's back half. Performed long enough for good reasons, it quietly became true. And third, the recital. June, about a year and a half out. Maya's school does this end-of-year thing. And she had a line to say, 1 line. She'd rehearsed it for weeks on my Thursdays. And I got there early, and then Lauren came in. With Todd. First time seeing them together in public. In a gymnasium full of families that used to be our mutual friends. And they sat 2 rows up and across. And I want to describe the next 40 minutes honestly, because this is the final exam of everything in this book, and I nearly failed it. The old machinery came online instantly, the heat in the neck, the tunnel vision, the drowning man's math, starting up. He's sitting where I should be. That's my seat, my life. And 18 months of tools got deployed in real time in a folding chair. The wave protocol. Name it. Ride it. This is a wave. It's 4 minutes long. It's not instructions. The audience check. Who would the rage even be for? The colleague frame. That's Maya's mother and her partner, attending Maya's recital, which is exactly what's supposed to happen. And then Maya came out with her class, found the crowd with that searchlight look kids have, found me, and lit up and waved with her whole arm, both arms, Daddy, and set her line looking half at her teacher and half at me, and afterward, in the gymnasium crush of juice boxes and folding chairs, she ran to me first. I'm not scoring that. I promised no scoring. She ran to me first because I was closest to the door, probably, but she ran, and I lifted her up. And over her shoulder I caught Lauren's eye, and Lauren gave me a small nod, and I gave one back, and Todd shook my hand and said she did great, and I said she really did, and gentlemen, that gym floor handshake that unremarkable, uncinematic, nobody-clapped moment of three adults being adults around an 8-year-old. That is what winning actually looks like on this road. Not the revenge body at the reunion. Not her regret. A kid who gets to have her whole family at her recital without checking anyone's face for weather. The war ends when you stop needing it. And the person who hands out the medal is 4 feet tall. She's 15 now. She has opinions about my music, all of them wrong, and a spreadsheet-level command of both households, calendars, and no memory, she tells me, of the door-crying era at all. Last year, some boy did some 14-year-old thing, didn't text back, took someone else somewhere, and she was quiet at dinner, and then she said, "It's fine, I'm being stupid," and I put down my fork and told her the 2 things her grandfather never told me. Feelings aren't stupid, they're information, and anyone who makes you feel like you're hard to want has told you about their eyes, not your face. She rolled those 14-year-old eyes, and later I heard her repeat it to a friend on the phone, word for word, as her own. Take the winds where they land, gentlemen. That's Maya. That's the continent. And with the home front actually stable, body rebuilt, mission running, kid thriving, war over, there was exactly one frontier left. The one everybody asks about first and should ask about last. The one I'd been quietly dreading and quietly ready for. Other women. Dating again. At 41, with a rebuilt life, a custody calendar, and a documented history of being terrible at exactly this. I did it wrong once, then wrong again, more educationally, and then, eventually, right? And the difference between those 3 is the next chapter. Chapter 14. Women Again. 3 stories. 3 eras, 1 chapter. I'm going to give you the rebound, the relapse, and the real thing. In that order. Because that's the order they came in. And because most books hand you a checklist for dating after divorce, and I think checklists lie. What doesn't lie is watching the same man, me, run 3 different women through 3 different versions of himself. And seeing exactly what changed and what it cost to change it. First, Kim. Month 6, deep in the crater, artery barely clamped, and I want to be honest about how it started. It started because being alone in that apartment on a Saturday night felt like being buried alive, and a woman from Dee's church softball network was. Everyone agreed, also going through it, also lovely, also lonely, and there was a barbecue. And Kim laughed at 2 of my jokes, and my starving nervous system lit up like a pinball machine, not because of Kim. I knew nothing about Kim, because of the dose. Female warmth, after months of withdrawal. We went out 4 times. It moved fast in the ways loneliness moves fast, and nowhere at all in the ways that matter, and I'll compress the ending, because it's shameful in the mundane way. A Sunday morning, her kitchen, she's making eggs, this kind, funny woman who deserved an actual candidate, and she's talking about maybe meeting each other's kids eventually, and I heard myself say, from very far away, that's not something Lauren and I ever, and stopped, called her Lauren, mid-sentence about children. The eggs went quiet, and Kim, God bless her forever, didn't get angry. She turned around with a spatula and said, kindly, like a diagnosis, you're not here. You know, you seem like a good man, but there's nobody actually in there right now, and I'm not going to date a man's fog. And I drove home with the radio off and heard it land in the file next to Beth's exit interview and Carrie's, same sentence, a decade and a half apart, nobody home. Except this time it wasn't the mask. I'd stopped performing. It was worse. It was true vacancy, honestly displayed. I was a house mid-renovation showing itself to tenants, and the fog she named was Lauren-shaped, and that's the rebound lesson in one line, gentlemen. Dating in the crater doesn't fill the crater. It just gives the crater a witness and hands your bill to someone who never ran up the tab. I called Kim 2 weeks later and apologized. Actually apologized. Took full ownership, no excuses woven in. And she was gracious. And that apology mattered more to my recovery than the 4 dates did. Because it was the first time in the whole file I'd left a woman with the ledger clean. Then the wilderness, because after Kim I did the readiness work, waited until alone stopped feeling like drowning. Gus's Friday night test. If you can spend a Friday alone in your apartment and genuinely enjoy the man you're with, you're cleared. And around year 2, I passed it and re-entered. And let me report on the terrain for the over 40 man with a custody calendar, because it deserves one honest paragraph. The apps at 41 are the apps. The same arithmetic I'd give any young man applies. It's a flooded market that punishes the desperate. Don't take the silence personally. Meet fast or not at all. And being a divorced father with 50-50 custody is, whatever the forums promise, neither doom nor catnip. It's a filter, the right kind. It clears out the incompatible early. And here's the thing my particular history handed me that turned out to be the actual asset. I knew my file. 20 years of first dates that died of exam behavior, and now I could feel the exam starting in my hands mid-date, feel the old machine reach for the agreeable answer, the checking question, the wrapped book energy, and I could put it down in real time. There was a date at a taco place, month 3 of the wilderness, where she asked what I wanted from all this, Renee's question, the question, and I felt the old vacancy answer assemble itself, whatever happens, happens, easy either way, and I looked at her and said instead, the truth. I'm building towards something real. I've got a daughter and a Tuesday class, and I like my life, and I'm looking for a woman who adds to it, and I intend to add to hers, and if we're not that, no harm done. She stared at me like I had produced a dove from a hat. Didn't work out, wrong fit, cheerfully mutual, and I drove home from that non-match feeling like a millionaire, because for the first time in my entire life, I had been on a date as a participant instead of an applicant. Some dates went nowhere, plenty. The 40-something first date graveyard is just as real as the 20s one, but the deaths were different now. They died of honest mismatch instead of vacancy. And gentlemen, when your first dates start failing for the right reasons, that's not the consolation prize. That is the recovery, measurable, in the wild. Then Nicole, and Nicole is the most important relationship in this book that you've never heard of, because Nicole is where the universe audited my rebuild. Year 2.5. Met in the wild, not the apps. A continuing ed seminar, smart, quick, a nurse, of course, and it was good. Genuinely good, 5 months of good, and I did it all differently. Led with a spine, held my Tuesdays, disagreed out loud, wanted things in the first person, and it was working, which is exactly why what happened next mattered. Month 5, her ex resurfaced. The serious one. The one before me, and she sat me down and was honest, told me she was confused, that he was pushing to try again, that she owed it to something old to figure it out, and I watched myself stand at the most familiar intersection of my life, the one with 16 years of wreckage in it, the place where every previous version of me had begged, negotiated, offered to wait, written a letter, held the exit shut with both hands. And I heard myself say, and I mean it was nearly out of body, I heard myself say, I think you should go figure it out then. I'm not a waiting room, and I won't share a lane with a ghost. If you close that door for real someday, and I'm still free, call me. And I got up, and I paid, and I hugged her, and I walked to my truck. And I want to be scrupulously honest about the next part, because this book has no montages. It hurt. It hurt for about 3 weeks. Real waves. The cereal aisle got me once. And I ran the protocols, named it, wrote it, told Gus, lifted heavy, taught my Tuesday class, and somewhere in week 3, the weather cleared, and I stood in my green kitchen one morning and did the math that made me put my coffee down. 12 years took me 18 months to metabolize. 5 good months took 3 weeks. Same heart, same intersection, same category of loss. The difference was the man carrying it, and that morning, not any date, not any woman, that morning was when I knew, with evidence, that I was no longer the driver from the file. The crash didn't crash me. Gentlemen, hear this, because nobody hands it to you. The proof of your rebuild will not arrive as a triumph. It will arrive as a loss that doesn't destroy you, and it will be the best bad news you ever get. And then Elena. Year 3.5, and I'll keep this shorter than my heart wants to. Partly privacy, partly because if I've done my job for 13 chapters, you already know what it looks like when a rebuilt man meets someone. There's almost no story, that's the point. Drama is the sound a pattern makes, and the pattern was gone. She was a friend of Dee's wife. We met at a cookout with no agenda. I didn't run an exam, and neither did she. It moved at the speed of 2 adults with full calendars and no vacancies to fill, which is to say, slowly, honestly, hilariously, logistically, her kids' soccer against my Thursdays. She met Maya at month 8, not month 2, that's a hard rule. I'd give any divorced father. The kid meets candidates, never applicants. And the thing I want on the record about Elena, the thing that tells you everything, is a small one. About a year in, some scheduling conflict, I told her plainly that Tuesday classes weren't movable, that they mattered to me, braced, some old muscle still braced, for the weather to turn. And she looked at me like I'd said the sky was blue, and said, "Obviously, that's your thing, we'll do Wednesday." And, gentlemen, the old me would have skipped the class, and the old me would have then, quietly, over years, come to resent her for a sacrifice she never asked for, and there it is, the entire mechanism of my first marriage, run in reverse, in one Wednesday. A man with a self, choosing a woman who never asked him to abandon it, because the women worth having never do. They can't want what isn't there, remember. Turns out the whole answer was to be there. One loose thread left, and it's the one your gut has been asking about since chapter 2, I know, because every man asks me, what about her? Lauren, Todd, the house, the farmer's market laugh, how did that story end, and did she ever look back? She did. They almost always do, and it came the way it always comes, as a soft little text on an ordinary evening, and what a man does, and the 10 minutes after that text arrives, is the final exam of this entire book. Last stretch. Let's talk about the text that comes. Chapter 15. The text that comes. Mine arrived on a Sunday in October, 3 years and 2 months after the spaghetti. I was at the kitchen table, grading my students. Practice scenarios. Red pen, coffee. Maya reading upside down, on the couch, because 9-year-olds only read upside down. And the phone buzzed. And the co-parenting channel had been so boring for so long that I assumed it was a schedule thing, and it wasn't a schedule thing. It said, "Hey, was just thinking about a lot of stuff. Are you doing okay? Like, actually okay? You seem good lately." 3 sentences and a question mark, and I want you to notice what my body did, because this is a field report from the far side, and the far side is the whole point of this chapter. My body did nothing. Pulse flat. Weather steady. I read it twice, put the phone face down, finished the scenario I was grading, and somewhere in me, quietly, a door I hadn't checked in months confirmed itself closed. Now rewind that same text, 2 years. If those 3 sentences had landed in month 4, month 6, month 10, gentlemen, I'd have been on the ceiling. I'd have drafted 40 replies. I'd have read that you seem good lately like a parole letter, called Danny, not slept, and answered, after all that strategy, with something desperate wearing a casual costume. The text is a constant, you see. It's the man who changes. So let me do for you what nobody did for me. Let me tell you now, in advance, while you're still in the blast radius, exactly what that text is, why it's almost certainly coming, and what the man you're becoming should do with it. First, the timing, because the timing is the tell. These texts do not come when you're on the floor. Word of the floor travels, mutual friends, the kid, the grapevine, and a man on the floor is heavy, guilt-heavy, mess-heavy. Nothing in a leaver's nervous system wants to reopen that account. The text comes when word travels that you're good. New body, new role, new woman. Some photo from a cookout where you're laughing with your whole face. That's not a coincidence. And it's also not, hear me, usually not the cartoon the forums draw, the calculating woman circling back to harvest a rebuilt man. It's simpler and more human and, honestly, sadder than that. Somewhere across town, her story about you has stopped working. The story every leaver tells themselves, the one that makes the leaving survivable, I left because he was, because we were, because it could never have been. That story requires you to stay the man she left. And the cookout photo just falsified it. And on top of that, in my case, and in most, the branch she climbed out on had stopped holding. Lauren and Todd made it about 2.5 years, I learned afterward. And when the new thing dies, a leaver is left alone with the math of what was traded, and the account that got heavier and heavier to avoid suddenly feels like the only place warmth was ever reliably stored. So the text comes, hey, thinking about stuff. Are you okay, like actually? It is not a plan. It's a flare from a person standing in the wreckage of her own decision, checking whether the bridge she burned still has a walkable beam. So what do you do? And I have to split this carefully, because there are 2 men listening, and they need opposite warnings. To the man still secretly waiting for this text, the one who will deny he's waiting, and knows the exact number of months since she left, brother, I was you. And here's what you need seared in. The text is not the door reopening. I know every cell in you is built to read it that way. Read the actual words again, hers and yours to come. If you answer it the waiting man's way, warm, fast, overfull, the conversation will bloom for a week, maybe 2. Nostalgia is a powerful drug shared by exactly 2 dealers, and there may even be a coffee. And the coffee may even feel like the movies, and then you will watch her. Remember, in real time, all the original reasons which have not changed, because people don't renovate in 2 years the way stories need them to, and the thing will collapse again, softer, stupider, and you'll be back in month 2 of a grief you'd already paid off. The house whose wiring burned it down needs new wiring, not a fresh coat of missing you. Statistically, reconciliations after a true walkaway hold at rates you don't want printed, and the ones that do hold, the rare ones, hold because both people did years of the kind of work this book describes, separately, first, and could prove it, and if that's genuinely your situation, you don't need my permission, but audit it like an engineer, not like a man being handed back his drug. And to the other man, the rebuilt one, or nearly, who reads the text and feels the old pull toward a different temptation, the scoreboard, finally, she sees it. Now I get to be cold. Now I compose the reply that wins. 3 drafts of elegant indifference. Brother, that's not the far side either. That's the bitterness getting one last invoice paid. If your reply is designed to make her feel anything, regret, loss, awe, you're still performing for her. The audience is back. She's still writing your material. Gus's 6 words, and the whole point of 3 years of work was that the theater goes dark. Winning the text is not a thing. There is no text you can send that retroactively fixes the farmer's market, and the man who no longer needs it fixed has already won in the only ledger that's real. Here's what I actually sent. Sunday night, after the grading was done, and I offer it as a template not because the words are magic, but because of what they don't do. I wrote, "I'm doing well, thanks. Hope you're doing okay too. Maya's teacher conference is the 14th. I'll send the details." That's it. Kind, brief, boring. 1 human sentence, 1 wish returned, and the channel steered right back to the only cargo it carries. And gentlemen, notice, no question. The waiting man's reply always ends in a question, because a question demands a reply, and a reply is a dose. No question. The flare gets acknowledged warmly, and nobody gets waved onto a burned bridge. She wrote back, "Okay, glad you're good." And a week later, at a Thursday pickup, the second wave came, the in-person one, because it often does. Maya ran ahead to the car, and Lauren lingered on the steps, arms crossed against the cold, and said, out of nowhere, and completely from the middle of herself, "Do you ever think we gave up too early?" And there it was. The sentence month 6 me would have traded a hand for. And I stood on the steps of the house I used to own, looking at a woman I'd loved since I was 26, and I searched, honestly, openly, the way Okafor taught me. I went looking for the wave, for the flicker, for the door, and gentlemen, I found what I found, and I'm going to report it exactly. Nothing. Not hate. Hate would have been something. Hate is still a rope tied to the dock, not longing dressed as anger. Just a kind of soft historical sadness, the way you feel about a house from your childhood, and underneath it, solid as the steps we stood on, the knowledge that the man she was asking about no longer existed to go back as. I said gently, because gentle costs nothing when you're free. I think the people we were then used everything they had. I'm not him anymore, and honestly, you're not her. And I've got Maya till Sunday, and we're good, Lauren. We're actually good. And she nodded, and her eyes did something wet and complicated that was hers to handle, not mine anymore. And that's the other half of freedom no one advertises. Her feelings stopped being my job the day I stopped billing her for mine, and I got in the truck where my daughter was arguing with the radio, and we drove to get pancakes for dinner, because Thursday is pancakes for dinner day. And that drive, the radio argument, the ordinary night with the door quietly shut behind me, that is the whole kingdom, gentlemen. That's what was on the other side of the floor, the file, the protocols, the garage, the folding chairs. Not victory. Tuesday. A Tuesday that's fully yours, with pancakes. One more word here, on forgiveness, because the steps conversation was only possible on the far side of it, and men get this wrong in both directions. Forgiving her was not saying it was okay. The overlap wasn't okay, the silent years weren't okay, and forgiveness that requires you to falsify the record is just the fog again. And it wasn't for her, she never asked. Most never ask. It's simpler, and it's colder than the greeting cards want, and warmer than the forums allow. Resentment is a subscription, remember, billed monthly to your own account, and forgiveness is just the cancellation notice. You forgive her the way you drop a rock you've been carrying up a mountain, not because the rock apologized, because your hands are needed for the climb. I dropped mine somewhere in year 3, no ceremony. I just noticed one day at the garage wall that it wasn't in my hands anymore. Yours will go the same way, gradually, then suddenly, and you'll know it's gone the day her flare lands on a flat pulse, and you answer with a teacher conference. So the text came, and the steps came, and nothing in me moved, and I drove home to pancakes. Which leaves only the accounting. 8 years since the spaghetti. What did all of it, the floor to the far side, actually add up to? What does got over her mean when you weigh it out? And what would I say to you, the man in the blast radius, if we had one last chapter together in the back of this ambulance? We do. Let's finish it. Chapter 16. The Man Who Got Over Her. Every rig I've ever worked keeps a run sheet, and at the end of a long call, after the patient's handed off and the adrenaline drains out of your hands, you sit on the bumper and you write down what happened, times, interventions, response, outcome, because the next crew needs the record, and because, though nobody says this part out loud, the writing is how you put the call down instead of carrying it home. This chapter is the run sheet. 8 years since a Tuesday in January, and I owe you the honest outcome data, and then I'll let you go, because you've got work waiting that no book can do for you. Patient, male, 38 at time of injury. Mechanism, walkaway spouse, 12-year relationship, overlap involved, minor child in the household. Initial course, catastrophic. Begging phase, 6 weeks, self-inflicted, fully documented in Chapter 3. No clinical benefit observed, do not repeat. Deterioration through month 5. Weight loss, alcohol dependence forming. Occupational near miss, and one night on a kitchen floor that the statistics say I share with more of you than will ever raise your hands. Interventions in order of administration. 1 brother, 40 minutes, in a t-shirt. 1 captain's kitchen table, and 5 rules. 1 therapist who asked where it goes and taught a grown man to ride a 4-minute wave. No contact. Properly understood as a tourniquet, not a play. 1 case file, 16 years deep, 6 women long, that found the common denominator sitting in the driver's seat. 1 dumpster, 3 boxes, a green wall, and a bed with no history. A garage at 5:40 in the morning where the wall only tracks one thing. A folder pulled from a drawer at month 16, and 11 students in folding chairs on a Tuesday night. A daughter watching all of it, taking her notes. 1 rebound owed an apology, 1 apology actually paid. 1 relationship lost at year 2.5 that healed in 3 weeks and proved the chassis. 1 woman named Elena who said, obviously, that's your thing, we'll do Wednesday. And 1 text on a Sunday in October that landed on a flat pulse. Outcome, patient recovered. Not restored, hear the difference. Restored means returned to previous condition, and the previous condition was the disease. Rebuilt. Discharged to a larger life. End of run sheet. So what does it actually mean, got over her, since it's the title on the cover and the thing you came for? Let me tell you what it doesn't mean first, because the counterfeits cost men years. It doesn't mean hating her. Hate is attachment with the poles reversed. The bitter man at the 10-year mark still checking her page is not over anything. He's married to the wreckage. It doesn't mean forgetting. I remember everything. The wedding, the spaghetti, the green jacket. Memory isn't the enemy. The charge on the memory is, and the charge is what drains. It doesn't mean never feeling a twinge. I felt one 2 years ago at Maya's graduation from middle school when the three of us stood for a photo and some ghost of the original architecture flickered for half a second. Twinges are permitted. Twinges are just the scar reporting in. And it definitely doesn't mean her regretting it, the revenge arc ending the internet sells, where she watches your glow up from across the gymnasium with her hand over her mouth. I got the closest real life comes to that scene. The steps, do you ever think we gave up too early? The flare every waiting man dreams of. And I can report from the far side that when it finally comes, if it comes, it arrives years after you've stopped needing it. At exactly the moment it can do nothing for you. That's the cosmic joke of this whole road. The prize gets delivered only after it's worthless. Over her means one thing, and it's the weather test. Her name, her face, her news, her flair, none of it changes your internal weather anymore. She got demoted from climate to fact. She's a true thing about your past, like the town you grew up in, formative, permanent, and powerless over what you do this afternoon. That's the whole trophy, gentlemen. It doesn't shine. It just weighs nothing. After years of everything, weighing everything, and the first morning you notice you're carrying nothing, you'll understand why I wrote this book with a steady hand. And here's the accounting nobody expects, the part I'd never say to month 2 me because he'd have thrown the book across the room. The injury was the way in. I'm not going to perfume it. I'd never have chosen it, and if I could spare Maya's little heart the door-crying era, I'd trade a great deal. But sit on the bumper with me and run the honest ledger. The man before the spaghetti was, we established this, a vacancy with a pension. Agreeable fog. A first-person man missing from his own sentences, 6 women deep in a pattern he'd never once examined, mission in a drawer, body on a couch, friendships outsourced, a golden retriever with a mortgage, and, this is the part that keeps me up when I think about it, he had no idea. He'd have died at 70-something, nicest guy, never knew. The demolition was the only thing that ever got that man's attention. Every load-bearing thing in my life today, the work I do on Tuesdays, the shape I'm in at 46, the honest way I love a woman now, the man my daughter thinks I am, which I have to try to deserve, all of it got built on ground the disaster cleared. It cost me a marriage to meet myself. I'd rather it had cost less. But I know men, you know men 70 years old, still fog, still orbiting someone's weather, who were never lucky enough to get hit by anything, and I no longer know how to call what happened to me only a tragedy. She didn't just leave me, gentlemen. She left me at the door of the only school that could take me. I went in. That part was mine. So, last minutes of the ride. You, the man in the blast radius, week 2 of it maybe, phone hot in your pocket, letter half drafted in your head. If I could reach back through 8 years and sit with exactly you, here's the whole book in the space of a bumper conversation. The pain is not permanent, it just lies about being permanent. That's its only trick. And you can outlast a liar. Don't send it, whatever it is, the text, the letter, the flowers. I sent them all, and I'm telling you from the far side, every single one made it longer. Close the artery, feel it or wear it, 4 minutes at a time, and get one man into the room tonight, your Danny, your Gus, and if there's truly nobody, a stranger on a crisis line beats the arithmetic. Interruption breaks the spell. I'm living proof twice over. Then, when you can stand, pull your file all the way back, every name, every no-second date, every month 5 speech, and find your driver. Because she was the occasion of this pain, brother. But the driver is the cause, and you'll meet the driver in the mirror, and that meeting, terrible as it is the trailhead of the whole climb. Then build body, money, mission, kid if you've got one, in that unglamorous order, 3 mornings a week, no audience, and let the fog burn off you a month at a time, and somewhere out there, a year from now too, you'll lose something else, a Nicole, a job, a month, and it'll heal in weeks instead of years. And you'll stand in your own kitchen with your coffee and realize the crash didn't crash you, and that morning, quiet, unphotographed, nobody watching, that morning is the whole war won. And the text will come when you're good, because you're good. Answer it kind, brief, and boring. Wish her well, and mean it. That's the graduation exam, meaning it. And then put the phone face down and go back to your actual life. The pancakes, the folding chairs, the green walls, the people who chose to rebuild you with their eyes open. Because here's the final line of the run sheet, the one I tattoo inside every heartbroken man's eyelids if they'd let me. Getting over her was never the destination, it just looks like one from the floor. It's the toll booth. The destination is a man you'd choose to be even if she'd never left, even if she'd never come. A first-person man with weather of his own. And the day you become him, the strangest thing happens to the woman this book was named for. You stop being the man who lost her. She becomes, at last at peace, just someone who knew you before you showed up. I'm signing off the way we do at shift change, the way Gus did the morning after my worst night, when he handed me his coffee and his kitchen table and the rest of my life. You're on the stretcher now, son, and every rule you know applies to you. So does every recovery I've ever witnessed. I've seen hearts restart on kitchen floors, gentlemen. I was one. Yours is next. End of run. Go get your second life.